Chapter 27:27. Swoosh! There was a flash of light. The darkness in front of Ji Tianqing dissipated, and light returned. All around him, above and below him, there was a dazzling purple light. Ji Tianqing opened his eyes and looked around. The situation was just as he had expected. He was currently in a huge ball of purple light with a radius of 70,000 miles. The condensed sacred purple light formed a spherical wall of light, like an indestructible heavenly curtain. The boundless scarlet lava was blocked by the purple light barrier as it churned violently. However, the 70,000 miles of space inside the ball of light was very spacious. The air was filled with strands of purple light, like clouds and flowing water, slowly flowing. In the middle of the ground, there was a sacred mountain that was 1,000 feet tall and was dark purple in color. Billions of five-colored veins extended from the foot of the mountain and spread out like veins, covering tens of thousands of miles of space. This special space was filled with the sacred power of the world, but there were no living creatures. It was dead silent. Ji Tianqing looked at the sacred purple mountain in the distance, and a gratified smile appeared on his face. Just as I expected, Planet Killer is the same as the Five Elements world. There is a special space deep in the Earth's core. It is the core of the world. I came prepared and spent almost a year to find the core of the world. However, the elites of the Heaven Lawless race do not know about the existence of the core of the world, nor do they know where to find it. Even if they knew, they would not be able to come here without the strength of a godly king. Elites who had not reached the godly king realm would be killed by the power of the world after entering the lava whirlpool. However, Ji Tianqing was different. He had already merged with the Five Elements world. As long as the Five Elements world was not destroyed, he would not die. Planet Killer was much smaller and weaker than the Five Elements world. It could not destroy the Five Elements world. Therefore, Ji Tianqing was able to come here unscathed. He collected his thoughts and flew toward the sacred purple mountain. The core of the Five Elements world was gold, while Planet Killer's was purple. Although the two mountains had different colors, their effects and power were equally powerful. Ji Tianqing flew to the peak of Mount Indigo and sat cross-legged on the mountain peak. He began to circulate and refine the world energy. However, he had tried over 100 times and spent 3 days, but all of them ended in failure. Even if he had mastered the Five Elemental world power and had the experience of refining the world mountain, it was useless here. The world power of Planet Heaven Killer was clearly different in nature. If Great Emperor Tian Fun, Tian Shu, and Yun Shuiyan were here, they would have had a chance to refine it. But he just couldn't. He had to think of another way. After pondering for a long time, Ji Tianqing decided to use the method he used to refine the Five Elements world. It was a stupid method, but it was effective in all the heavens. Ji Tianqing forced out 3 drops of dark golden god blood and dripped them onto the purple world mountain. Those 3 drops of god blood were the blood of his heart. They contained 30% of his power and cultivation. When the divine blood dripped onto the purple mountain, it immediately melted into the mountain, causing the mountain to emit a brilliant purple light. Ji Tianqing's face turned pale, and his aura weakened a lot. However, a gratified smile appeared on his face as he began to refine the power of the world. This method was indeed effective. The 3 drops of god blood were used as a catalyst to build a bridge between him and the purple mountain. His divine consciousness was immersed in the world meridian, and he frantically absorbed the purple world power. Swoosh! 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 Thousands of strands of sacred purple light flew out of the purple mountain and entered his body. Ji Tianqing was immersed in his cultivation. He had no distractions and was fully focused. His mind saw the scenes of Planet Heaven Killer through the world meridian. The scenes of the continents, mountains, and rivers appeared in his mind, changing like illusions. He saw countless Heaven Killer craftsmen rebuilding their homes day and night. Many Heaven Killer warriors were still searching for survivors and treating the injured in the ruins and the sea. There were also fleets of Heaven Killer fleets flying across the sky, patrolling the continents. Thousands of images flooded Ji Tianqing's mind, allowing him to quickly understand the current situation of the Heaven Destroyer star. Time passed silently. 2 months passed quickly. Ji Tianqing had refined a huge amount of world power and could control 1/10 of planet Heaven Killer. Half a year later, the world power he had refined had increased threefold, and he could control 3/10 of planet Heaven Killer. After 8 months, the world power he had absorbed would be able to control 40% of planet Heaven Killer. At this time, the power of the 3 drops of God blood had been completely exhausted. Ji Tianqing could no longer refine the world power. Unless he sacrificed more than half of his God blood at the risk of his cultivation level dropping like when he refined the 5-element world. Without a doubt. Ji Tianqing did not intend to do that. It would be a waste of time, and his cultivation level would drop, and his strength would drop. Moreover, his goal was not to control planet Heaven Killer, but to destroy this planet. 40% of the world power is enough to move planet Heaven Killer, Ji Tianqing muttered to himself. He decisively ended his cultivation and withdrew his power. The black hole plan can finally be carried out. His eyes were filled with anticipation as he waved his fist. Then, he circulated his energy and sent a sacred purple light into the world mountain. Through the world meridian in the purple mountain, he controlled 40% of planet Heaven Killer and released a vast amount of world power. Swoosh! Suddenly, planet Heaven Killer, which was floating in the void, emitted 100,000 streaks of purple flames that illuminated 300 million miles of the void. The 100,000 streaks of purple flames formed by the world power were all concentrated in the southern hemisphere of planet Heaven Killer. A terrifying power erupted and immediately pushed the huge planet Heaven Killer to fly in the void. The motionless planet Heaven Killer suddenly started to fly. This caused the entire planet to tremble violently dozens of times. The planet only trembled slightly, but it was an earth-shattering earthquake and disaster for the Heaven Killers on the various continents. The 3 continents that had finally calmed down immediately cracked again. The continents broke apart, causing volcanoes and magma to erupt in countless areas. The tides in the endless sea rose violently, and huge waves covered the sky and earth, drowning countless continents and mountains. A calamity that was not too big but still shocking once again enveloped the Heaven Punisher race. As a result, more than 20 billion people on the 3 continents and 2 seas fell into chaos and disaster again. If a peerless expert stood in the void, he would be able to see a magical and brilliant scene. The southern half of planet Heaven Killer spewed out endless purple flames and pushed the entire planet toward the north. Only the gods in the 9 heavens could do such an earth-shattering thing. No one in the 3,000 mortal worlds had ever seen such a scene. Although planet Heaven Killer was still very slow when it first started to fly. But as time passed, planet Heaven Killer's speed continued to increase, becoming faster and faster. Half a day later, planet Heaven Killer's speed was as fast as lightning, leaving behind a trail of purple flames in the void. The scene was spectacular. Chapter 27-28. The 3 continents and 2 seas of planet Heaven Trader were in chaos and panic. Fortunately, the catastrophes of the earth, volcanic eruptions, and huge tides only lasted for half a day before they ended. Even so, more than 1 billion members of the Heaven Trader died and more than 2 billion people were injured. Tens of thousands of the cities that were in perfect condition were destroyed. Cities that had just been built or were in the process of being built were turned into ruins again. This made the craftsmen of the Heaven Trader break down. The people were helpless and panicked. Everyone was like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. They didn't know where to hide, nor did they know when the next disaster would come. Therefore, countless generals tried to contact the Emperor God Palace to report the news. However, the Emperor God Palace only issued an order for the hundreds of millions of soldiers to defend their territories and comfort the people as soon as possible. The order didn't mention anything about the cause of the disaster and the preventive measures. Because, Tian Shu and Yun Shuiyan didn't know what was going on. When Planet Heaven Trader was first pushed, there was a huge earthquake and tsunami. The Emperor God Palace naturally knew about this. Tian Shu was shocked. He immediately put on his armor and took the Neptune's halberd to seek revenge on Ji Tianqing. He subconsciously thought that Ji Tianqing had attacked Planet Heaven Trader. However, Yun Shuiyan stopped him and told him solemnly that it wasn't Ji Tianqing. Planet Heaven Trader had run away. Tian Shu was dumbfounded when he heard this. Planet Heaven Trader ran away. Mother, what do you mean? Planet Heaven Trader was fine. Why would it run away? How could it run away? Yun Shuiyan said with an odd expression, I know that this matter is absurd to you, but it's absolutely true. I can't explain it in a few words. I'll take you to the void and you'll understand. Therefore, Yun Shuiyan took Tian Shu and drove the Black Dragon battleship to the void. Swoosh! A few hours later, the Black Dragon battleship flew into the vast void. Tian Shu and Yun Shuiyan walked out of the battleship and stood on the wide deck, looking down at Planet Heaven Trader. They could clearly see that the southern hemisphere of Planet Heaven Trader was erupting with hundreds of thousands of purple flames. An unimaginably huge thrust was pushing the Heaven Destroyer star through the void at a speed faster than lightning. This. Tian Shu was dumbfounded on the spot. He was so shocked that his jaw dropped. Mother, what's going on? How could this be? Although he was known as the #1 genius in the starry skies, with extraordinary aptitude and perception. However, he had always lived on Planet Heaven Crusher, and his status was too honorable. His life had been smooth since he was young, and he had never experienced any setbacks. Why would he turn against us? Moreover, the honorable godly king has already taken you in as his disciple. Hearing her words, Tian Shu finally calmed down. That's right. The godly king has no reason to exterminate us. But I still can't believe that this is Ji Tianqing's doing. Yun Shuiyan said indifferently, it doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. Whether this is Ji Tianqing's doing or not, we'll talk about it later. What we need to consider now is where Planet Heaven Killer is flying to. How does the other party control the power of the cosmos? What conspiracy is driving Planet Heaven Killer to fly? How should we stop it? As she spoke, Yun Shuiyan looked ahead with a sharp gaze, observing the boundless void. Tian Shu fell silent for a moment. He could not answer any of the questions, nor did he have a clue. All he could do was remain silent and not disturb Yun Shuiyan's thoughts. After a long while, Yun Shuiyan observed the boundless void in front of her and did not find any problems. She pondered for a long time before muttering in a low voice, the source of the power of the world should be within the Earth's core. It said that it's in the core of the world. Unfortunately, only experts who have reached the godly king realm can go deep into the Earth's core and enter the core of the world. Tian Shu continued, in that case, we can't cut off the power of the world, nor can we stop Planet Heaven Killer from flying. Yun Shuiyan nodded. Tian Shu pointed at the void in front of Planet Heaven Killer and said, then all we can do is wait and observe to see if Planet Heaven Killer will encounter any danger. Danger? Yun Shuiyan, who was deep in thought, had a flash of inspiration when he reminded her. She immediately thought of something. Her expression changed on the spot as a terrifying cold light flashed in her eyes. Chapter 27-29. Seeing the sudden change in Yun Shuiyan's expression, Tian Shu frowned. He hurriedly asked, Imperial Mother, have you thought of something? Yun Shuiyan nodded slightly and said in a serious tone, after your reminder, I seem to have guessed the other party's conspiracy. What conspiracy? Tian Shu asked instinctively. Yun Shuiyan explained patiently, the most common dangers in the void are meteorite belts, void storms, void fires, folded spaces, and black holes. If the heaven's fault planet is traveling in the void and encounters a large-scale void storm, void fire, or a folded space, it will suffer heavy losses. If it collides with a meteorite belt or other stars, the heaven's fault planet is likely to be torn apart. The consequences will be even worse than when the meteorite collided with it. At this point, Yun Shuiyan paused for a moment before continuing slowly. If the heaven's fault planet were to collide with the most mysterious and terrifying black hole, it would be beyond redemption. Even a godly king powerhouse would die if they were swallowed by a black hole, let alone a star. Even if the heaven's fault planet was not swallowed by a black hole, it would still gravitate towards the gravitational pull. Once it enters the gravitational field of the black hole, it will be torn to pieces and disintegrate. Tian Shu's eyes widened and he shouted with grief and indignation, "Damn it! That little bastard is so vicious. So despicable." He was so angry that his chest rose and fell rapidly, and his eyes turned blood-red. At this point, he was no longer concerned about whether the meteorite and the power of the world were driven by Ji Tianqing. Unknowingly, he had accepted and acquiesced in this matter. Yun Shuiyan stared in front of the heaven's fault planet and said solemnly, "Tian Shu, the only thing we can do now is to keep an eye on the void in front of us and be vigilant of the dangers." Tian Shu hesitated and asked, "Mother, if you're right and the heaven's fault planet is going to collide with a star or enter a black hole, then, what should we do? Sit and wait for death?" Yun Shuiyan shook her head decisively and said, "Of course not. Even if we can't stop it, there are still the gods from the upper realm." Tian Shu's face was filled with worry. He smiled bitterly and said, "Mother, even if we sacrifice 300,000 people to contact the upper realm deities, they won't be able to help us. No matter what, they couldn't descend to Heaven Traitor Star. At most, they could only scatter a little bit of divine light. But it's useless. It can't save planet Heaven." Yun Shuiyan said coldly, "So what? All we can do is to do our best and leave the rest to fate. If 300,000 isn't enough, then sacrifice 3 million, or even 30 million. Tian Shu was speechless. Even though he felt that his mother's actions were very extreme and that she did not care about the lives of the Heaven Punishers at all. But now that things had come to this, the entire Heaven Punishing planet was in danger. If they weren't careful, more than 20 billion people would die. Under these circumstances, his mother had no other choice. The Heaven FA star was still speeding through the void at an increasingly fast speed. Inside the world core, Ji Tianqing was still channeling the world energy within the Purple Mountain. Although he could only use 40% of the Heaven Punishing Star's power. This was enough for the Heaven Punishing Star to fly through the void like a ball of dazzling purple light with a long purple tail flame. Unfortunately, Tian Shu and Yun Shuiyan were in the void and not on the Heaven Punishing Star. Otherwise, Ji Tianqing would have a whole new level of respect for Yun Shuiyan if he heard the conversation between the mother and son. This was because Yun Shuiyan had guessed correctly. It was just as she had guessed. Ji Tianqing's black hole plan was to push the Heaven Punishing Star into a black hole and destroy the entire planet. Before arriving at the Heaven Punishing Star, Ji Tianqing had been planning for this. About 1 billion miles north of the Heaven Punishing Star, there was an empty region. In that void, Ji Tianqing found a huge mysterious black hole. A few hundred years ago, there were a few planets in that void. Of course, they were all lifeless and barren planets. Ever since the mysterious black hole appeared, it had been moving slowly in the void. In the past few hundred years, a few barren planets had been swallowed by the black hole. Now, Ji Tianqing wanted to send the Heaven Punishing Star over as well. As time passed, the distance between the Heaven Punishing Star and the black hole grew closer and closer. In just 5 days, the distance between the two had shrunk by half. It was only 500 million miles away. The Heaven Punishing Star was heading towards destruction. However, Tian Shu and Yun Shuiyan had yet to discover the existence of the black hole. The black hole was huge, with a radius of 100 million miles. The gravitational circle around the black hole had also reached a radius of 200 million miles. However, the black hole was as black as ink and the gravitational circle was invisible. With Tianshu and Yun Shuyan's eyesight, it was impossible for them to discover it from 500 million miles away. Just like in the past, Ji Tianqing and the others would only discover the black hole when they were 300 million miles away. Peace gradually returned to the heaven-punishing star. The more than 20 billion citizens of the heaven-punishing star thought that the disaster was over. They had no idea that they were about to face an even more terrifying disaster. The Black Dragon warship was still speeding through the void. It could only keep up with the heaven-punishing star's speed when it was at full power. Yun Shuiyan stood alone at the bow of the warship. She stood proudly on the dragon's head and stared coldly at the void in front of her. 5 days had passed. She had been standing there without moving half a step. Tianshu stood with her for 3 days before losing patience and returning to the warship to deal with government affairs. The past 5 days had been peaceful and the heaven-punishing star had not encountered any setbacks. However, Yun Shuiyan did not let down her guard at all. Instead, the uneasiness in her heart grew stronger. She had a strong premonition that after the temporary calm, there would be a shocking storm. Therefore, she had Tianshu order the head ritual master to prepare everything. Now, the head ritual master was on standby with 300 priests on the altar of the Imperial God Palace. The 300,000 citizens of the heaven-punishing star were also sealed around the altar as sacrifices. They could be used at any time. In addition, there were 1 million citizens of the heaven-punishing star as backup sacrifices. They stayed in the Imperial God Palace. In addition to preparing for the grand sacrificial ceremony, Yun Shuiyan also thought of a way out. If the grand sacrificial ceremony failed, even the gods would not be able to save the heaven-punishing star. Then, she would decisively give up on the heaven-punishing star and take Tianshu with her to activate the laws of heaven and earth and ascend to the upper realm. As long as she and Tianshu survived, there would be a chance for revenge in the future. As for the life and death of the heaven punishers, she could not care less. After all, she was not a member of the heaven punishers. After a long wait and suffering, another 2 days passed. The heaven-punishing star advanced another 200 million miles. At this time, the heaven-punishing star was only 300 million miles away from the mysterious black hole. Yun Shuiyan, who was standing at the bow of the warship and observing the void, finally realized that something was wrong. She saw a blurry black shadow in the boundless void in front of her. It looked like a huge vortex. The void was cold and gloomy, but it was not completely dark. There was some starlight. However, the surroundings of the vortex were as black as ink. It was as if all the starlight had been swallowed by the vortex. Seeing this, Yun Shuiyan's delicate body trembled. Her eyes emitted a cold light. It's 5 chapters again. Brothers, please cast your votes. End of chapter. Chapter 27:30. A black hole. Yun Shuiyan reacted in an instant and shouted in a cold tone. I was right, it's a black hole. That damn Ji Tianqing, how could he be so vicious? Yun Shuiyan's expression changed. She quickly sent a voice transmission to Tianshu and ordered, Tianshu, a black hole has appeared 300 million miles ahead. Send an order to the Archbishop immediately. Tell her to initiate the sacrificial ceremony and contact the upper realms deities. Tianshu was busy dealing with government affairs in the battleship. His body stiffened when he heard Yun Shuiyan's voice. His expression became extremely solemn. Swoosh! In a flash of white light, he teleported to Yun Shuiyan's side and looked ahead with a burning gaze. Soon, he saw the blurry shadow of the vortex in the void ahead. He took out his communication jade slip without hesitation and sent an order to the Archbishop. Then, he asked solemnly, Mother, in your opinion, how big is the black hole? Will planet Fa be completely swallowed by the black hole? Yun Shuiyen said coldly, according to my estimation, the black hole should be 100 million miles wide. According to convention, the 200 million miles around the black hole is a gravitational circle. Once planet Fa enters the gravitational circle, the divine light barrier and heaven and earth spiritual chi will be swallowed. Without the protection of the divine light and heaven and earth spiritual chi, planet Fa will be torn apart. The entire planet will collapse and disintegrate into endless fragments, then be swallowed by the black hole. Now, we're only 100 million miles away from the gravitational circle. We'll enter it in a day. What? We're already so close. Tianshu was shocked. He asked anxiously, if the upper realm's deities can't save planet Fa, what should we do? Yun Shuiyen said calmly, you don't have to worry. I'm prepared. If planet Fa is destined to be swallowed by the black hole, we'll escape before it enters the gravitational circle. I'll bring you to heaven. No. Tianshu shook his head and refused. He said unwillingly, we can escape, but what about the 20 billion people who want to kill planet Fa? What about the tens of millions of soldiers and fleets? In the mortal world, we're the overlords of the major star regions, the noblest powerhouses. Once you ascend to the upper realm, you'll be a lowly deity with no power or influence. Yun Shuiyen looked at him with a stern expression. She seemed to have expected better from him. She reprimanded him, what's there to miss about the riches and glory of the mortal world? With Mother's experience and methods, as well as your talent and aptitude, we can still become the overlords of a region when we ascend to the upper realm and rule over thousands of deities. Sky Pivot fell silent, struggling and hesitating. Yun Shuiyen added, if you really can't bear to see billions of citizens die and tens of millions of soldiers reduced to ashes, then give the order now. He ordered all citizens who were above the martial sage realm to gather at the imperial cities of the various countries as soon as possible. Then, they would board the battleships and leave Heaven Trader Star in batches. Have them form a fleet and rush to Celestial Globe and Muchu Star. Tianshu was startled and he asked, only people above the martial sage realm can leave Heaven Punisher Star. What about the other 20 billion people? Are they going to be buried with the Heaven Fa Star? Yun Shuiyen said expressionlessly, only the strong have the value of survival. The weak have no right to live. Tianshu's face froze. He frowned and said, but there's only 1 day left. It's too rushed. Let them live as long as they can. Yun Shuiyen said indifferently, those who can't escape in time will die. Tianshu smiled bitterly and asked, Mother, since you already had this idea, why didn't you give the order a few days in advance? Are you blaming me for not caring about the lives of the citizens? Yun Shuiyen frowned and said angrily, before today, we couldn't be sure if Heaven Trader Star would hit the black hole. Moreover, all the soldiers above the martial sage realm have to stay in Heaven Trader Star to guard the homes of the citizens and prevent Ji Tianqing and the others from attacking. Tianshu quickly bowed and apologized, Mother, please calm down. I won't blame you. I will give the order now and follow your orders. After Tianshu bowed, he immediately returned to the battleship and gave the order. It took 2 hours for his order to be transmitted to the 3 continents and then to the various holy kingdoms. It would take another 4 to 6 hours to travel from the various holy kingdoms to the various cities. It would take at least a day for all the martial sages to gather in the imperial city and leave Heaven Trader Star on the battleship. It would take another 4 to 6 hours for the fleet to leave Heaven Trader Star. Therefore, most of the soldiers and citizens of Heaven Trader Realm could not leave Heaven Trader Star in 2 days. If no one stopped Heaven Trader Star from hitting the black hole, almost 99% of the citizens would be killed. Heaven Trader Star, Emperor God Palace. In the middle of a square that was 300 miles wide, there was an altar that was 100 miles wide. This was the most sacred altar of the Heaven Trader tribe, and it was only used once every 50 years. The altar was 100 miles wide and 1,000 feet tall. It was made of purple blood divine jade, and there were more than 30 million precious divine stones in it. At that moment, the grand sacrificial ceremony had begun. The entire altar shone with purple light, and it lit up the sea of clouds. The grand priest, who was dressed in a luxurious purple robe, stood in the middle of the altar. He held a staff that was as tall as a man and knelt on the ground to pray. He looked very pious. Around the altar, 300 priests in white robes were holding staffs and compasses. They were arranged in a special formation as they knelt on the ground and chanted. The sound of everyone chanting together was deep, solemn and dignified. It reverberated in the sky. The square below the altar was filled with citizens of Heaven Trader Star. There were 300,000 people in the square, and it was so crowded that not even a drop of water could trickle through. However, everyone was in a formation, and it did not reduce the chaos at all. The citizens of Heaven Trader Star were all weak martial artists. However, they were strong and they were full of blood chi. They were very pious in their faith. Even though they knew that they were sacrifices, none of them retreated or ran away. Instead, everyone's faces were filled with pride and anticipation. Their eyes were burning with passion. It was their honor to be able to sacrifice themselves for the Heaven Trader Star to the Supreme Being King. About 4 hours later, the head ritual master and the 300 priests finally activated the grand array of the sacrificial altar. The altar shone with an even more dazzling purple light. It released a vast and powerful divine aura that shook the heavens and earth. Seeing this, the head ritual master revealed a look of relief and quietly wiped away the sweat on her forehead. He knelt on the ground and chanted a long and cryptic incantation. Then, he waved the staff in his hand and shouted, "Let the sacrifice begin." As his voice fell, the 300 priests used all their strength to activate the altar's power. The 300,000 Heaven Trader Star martial artists below the altar were filled with anticipation. The group of martial artists at the front knelt on the ground and kowtowed 3 times and 9 times in a pious and respectful manner. Then, they crawled on the ground and climbed onto the altar. Chapter 27:31. Swoosh. When the tens of thousands of devout martial artists climbed up the altar immediately emitted a blinding purple light. In the blink of an eye, the tens of thousands of martial artists were enveloped by the sacred purple light. The purple light was like a blazing divine fire, quickly devouring the bodies of the martial artists. In just a few breaths, the tens of thousands of martial artists melted in the purple light, leaving only piles of black ashes. These martial artists had sacrificed their flesh and souls, disappearing forever. The purple light at the top of the altar had also gained 2 shades of dark red, becoming more turbulent. Then, the second batch of offerings knelt on the ground. Again, the tens of thousands of martial artists kowtowed to the sky and crawled up the altar. Swoosh! Another purple light lit up like a raging fire, devouring many martial artists. Then, the third, fourth, and fifth batches of offerings climbed up the altar one after another. With the sacrifice of tens of thousands of martial artists, the altar's brilliance became more dazzling, and its aura became more powerful, sweeping across tens of thousands of miles. The purple light that shot up to the sky became more turbulent as if it was connected to the 9 heavens. Unknowingly, another 2 hours had passed. The 300,000 martial artists were divided into 30 batches, and all of them had been sacrificed. The purple light and aura of the altar had reached an unprecedented peak. The entire imperial god palace and even the sea of clouds within 30,000 miles were enveloped by the purple light. However, there was nothing unusual in the sky. The archbishop and the 300 priests did not dare to slack off. They continued to chant and cast spells with all their might. 4 hours had passed, and there was still no response from the upper realms deities. The archbishop was a little anxious and worried, and his forehead was sweating profusely. At this moment, Tian Shu sent a communication jade slip to ask about the situation of the grand sacrificial ceremony. The archbishop reported the situation as it was, feeling uneasy. Not long after, Tian Shu's communication jade slip flew back and gave an order. The deities of the upper realm are not responding. There must be not enough offerings. Continue to smelt offerings until the deities respond. The head ritual master obeyed and hurriedly sent people to gather more offerings. Fortunately, he followed Tian Shu's order and prepared 1,000,000 martial artists in advance, waiting for orders in the Imperial God Palace. Not long after, a large number of Imperial God Palace protectors brought 300,000 offerings to the square. The previous scene quickly repeated itself. The 300,000 martial artists were divided into 30 batches, and they climbed up the altar one after another, disintegrating in the sacred purple light. The altar absorbed a large amount of qi, blood, and souls, and its power reached an unprecedented peak. The purple light was even more dazzling, and the altar's aura was so majestic that everyone was suffocating. The altar's aura. Finally, some strange phenomena appeared in the dazzling purple sky. Dazzling lightning and golden light flickered in the sky as if they were about to break the barrier between the mortal and divine realms. Seeing this scene, the archbishop and of the gods of the Imperial God Palace, the deities. Hurry! Almighty God, you have sensed our sincerity. Don't continue to add of offerings of offerings. The head officiant waved her scepter and shouted at the top of her lungs. Thus, the Imperial of the God Heaven, of them, inside the world core of planet Tianfeng. Ji Tianqing ended the 7 days of spellcasting and slowly withdrew his palms. He looked a little tired, and beads of sweat could be seen on his forehead. Obviously, he had spent a lot of energy controlling the power of the world and pushing planet Heaven to the black hole. Phew! Finally, it's done. Planet Heaven is only 150 million miles away from the black hole. It will enter the black hole in 1.5 days and be completely destroyed. After flying another 50 million miles, it will enter the black hole's gravitational circle in a few hours. Once it enters the gravitational circle, even a divine emperor can't change the outcome. Ji Tianqing smiled with relief. Planet Heaven was only 50 million miles away from the gravitational circle. With the terrifying inertia, it would rush into the gravitational circle, and then be torn to pieces by the black hole. Ji Tianqing's mission was completed, and he decided to leave Planet Heaven. However, before he left Planet Heaven he wanted to take a look at the situation there. He wanted to know how the Imperial God Palace would react. What were Tian Shu and Yun Shuiyan feeling right now? Thus, Ji Tianqing's consciousness entered the Purple Mountain and observed Planet Heaven through the veins of the world. Unfortunately, the Imperial God Palace was located at the top of the vast sea of clouds. The veins of the world that he had refined could not detect that area. Naturally, he could not see the Imperial God Palace either. Ji Tianqing was a little disappointed. He then observed other areas of Planet Heaven through the veins of the world. After a while, he suddenly found something strange. On one of the continents, countless experts of the heaven-seeking sect were frantically rushing in a certain direction. Martial sages flew in the sky or rode on demonic beasts. Most of the experts of the martial god realm rode on warships. Everyone's goal was the same, which was the imperial city of each holy kingdom. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing was a little surprised and thought to himself, what are those experts of the heavens tribe doing? They are all as anxious as if they were reincarnated. Could it be that Yun Shuiyan and Tian Shu found the black hole and gathered all the experts of the heavens tribe to fight against it? But it's useless. Even if they gather 100,000 martial gods, they won't be able to stop Planet Heaven. With doubts in his heart, Ji Tianqing shifted his gaze to the imperial city of one of the holy kingdoms. He immediately saw a large number of warships floating in the sky above the imperial city. There were at least a few thousand of them. Batch after batch of martial sages rushed into the battleship, fighting to be the first. In a short while, thousands of warships were filled with people and formed a huge fleet that rose into the sky. Ji Tianqing's gaze followed the fleet as it crossed the boundless sky and finally broke through the thin holy light barrier and entered the empty space. They have entered the empty space. Do they really want to stop planet Heaven? Ji Tianqing thought to himself and felt that there was something wrong. It didn't take long for him to discover something even more interesting. After the fleet entered the empty space, they did not have any intention of stopping planet Heaven. The fleet plunged into the empty space and fled in the opposite direction. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing suddenly understood. I see. I thought they were going to make a last-ditch struggle. I didn't expect them to abandon their planet and escape. Ji Tianqing sneered and immediately controlled the power of the Heavens tribe to attack the fleet. The fleet had just left planet Heaven and had flown tens of thousands of miles away. The more than 100,000 experts in the warships looked as if they had just survived a disaster and felt lucky. Many people were discussing why planet Heaven was flying in the empty space. Why would Fa Tianqing come here? At this moment, 10 huge purple pillars of light shot out from planet Heaven Trader and blasted towards the fleet. Boom! 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 In an instant, 10 purple light pillars that were thousands of miles long drowned the entire fleet and created earth-shattering explosions. Chapter 2732. The 10 purple light pillars were formed by the power of the realm. The so-called power of the world could create a world, but it could also destroy a world. How terrifying was its power! The thousands of battleships were just ordinary battleships. Most of the people in the battleships were martial sages and only a few were martial gods. How could they withstand the attack of the power of the realm? In the blink of an eye, the thousands of battleships were turned into pieces and disintegrated. As for the hundreds of thousands of heaven punishers, they had naturally been reduced to ashes without leaving behind any corpses. However, they had died in vain and did not know who had killed them. Ji Tianqing used the power of the Heaven Destroyer Star to destroy the entire fleet with one move. He was in a good mood. At that moment, he suddenly realized that there was another fleet in the void not far away. The fleet was slightly smaller and there were only about 600 battleships. It was obvious that they had just escaped from a country's imperial city and were preparing to head to their new home. Ji Tianqing did not hesitate and used the power of the realm again to release 9 purple light pillars. Boom! 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 9 pillars of light thousands of kilometers long instantly annihilated the entire fleet, leaving not a single piece of armor behind. Next, Ji Tianqing used the power of the realm to observe the void around the Heaven Destroyer Star. Within 2 hours, he discovered more than a dozen fleets. Every fleet had a mighty aura, with the largest having over 1,000 battleships and the smallest having over 500 to 600. Many of the battleships carried the Heaven Destroyer Star into the void and escaped from the Heaven Destroyer Star as quickly as possible. However, those fleets were doomed to tragedy when they were discovered by Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing attacked more than a dozen times and used the power of the realm to destroy the fleets. The Black Dragon battleship followed the Heaven Destroyer Star. Yun Shuiyan, who was standing at the bow of the battleship, saw many fleets being destroyed by the purple light. With her intelligence, she knew what was going on at a glance. She was instantly enraged and her eyes were filled with killing intent. Damn bastard! It must be Ji Tianqing. It must be him. He can really control the power of the realm and destroy the fleets that escaped into the void. Damn it! Damn it! Yun Shuiyan was so angry that her face turned ashen. Her entire body was burning with rage. Unfortunately, she didn't know where Ji Tianqing was hiding. She wanted to find Ji Tianqing for revenge, but she didn't know where to start. He was furious, but there was nothing he could do. The only thing she could think of was to urge Dubhe to ask about the situation of the heaven-worshipping ceremony. Dubhe. In another 20 million miles, planet FA would enter the gravitational sphere. How's the progress of the grand sacrificial ceremony? Yun Shuiyan stood at the ship's bow and sent a voice transmission to SkyPivot. Tian Shu had been giving out orders and receiving reports from the various divine nations. He was so busy that his head was in a mess. When he heard Yun Shuiyan's question, his body stiffened as he grew increasingly anxious. Mother, just now, the Archbishop sent a message saying that the gods of the upper realm have already reacted. It's just that the sky is still filled with lightning and divine light. The deities of the upper realm have yet to issue their oracle. Yun Shuiyan frowned and ordered in a deep voice, hurry him up again. We don't have enough time to melt all the offerings. Tian Shu acknowledged the order and hurriedly took out the communication jade slip and gave the order to the Archbishop. Inside the Imperial God Palace, the altar had devoured 900,000 warriors, and its power had already reached its peak. The purple light that shot into the sky turned everything within 50,000 miles into a world of purple light. The majestic aura suppressed the Archbishop and the 300 priests to the ground. They could not stand up at all. Such terrifying momentum and power was something that no one had ever experienced before. The Archbishop was even worried that the power of the sacrifice would be too terrifying and cause the altar to explode. However, he also understood that planet FA had reached a point of life and death. Even if the altar were to explode, even if hundreds or tens of millions of people were to be sacrificed, he had to contact the gods of the upper realm. At this moment, a jade slip flew through the air. The Archbishop hurriedly reached out and caught it. His consciousness entered it and read Tian Shu's order. A moment later, he put away the communication jade slip and shouted, "Quick! Bring the last 400,000 sacrifices here." His order was passed down. Not long after, a large number of Imperial God Palace protectors brought the 400,000 warriors to the spacious square. The square was so crowded that not even a drop of water could trickle through. The scene was a little chaotic. However, the Archbishop could not care less. He hurriedly ordered the sacrifices to start the sacrifice. 10,000 warriors in a batch began to kowtow and worship. They crawled onto the altar and turned into ashes in the purple light. As time passed, batch after batch of warriors completed the sacrifice. The purple light and power of the altar were still slowly rising, approaching the critical point. The 300 priests who presided over the sacrificial ceremony gradually could not bear the terrifying pressure. Everyone's face was pale, and purple blood flowed out of their bodies. They also began to feel dizzy. When the 400,000 sacrifices were reduced by half, the power of the altar reached the critical point. Crack, 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 suddenly, more than 10 cracks appeared on the altar that was thousands of feet tall and spread out in all directions. Bam bam bam, a few of the white-robed priests who presided over the sacrifice also exploded on the spot, turning into a mist of blood that sprinkled on the altar. The Archbishop in the middle of the altar was also suppressed to the ground. The scepter in his hand began to crack. Cracks appeared all over his body, and purple blood spurted out. His bones also began to shatter. However, no one retreated or hesitated. They continued to preside over the sacrifice. As long as they could communicate with the upper realm deities, it would be worth it even if they all sacrificed themselves. Cracks began to appear on the surface of the altar. The entire altar began to shake violently, and countless pieces of rubble crumbled. At this moment, the thunder and divine light in the sky suddenly exploded with a loud noise that shook the universe. Kaboom! Along with that enormous bang that seemed to split the heavens and earth apart, an incomparably enormous gap split open in the boundless sky. It was a blazing white gap that was tens of thousands of miles long. Endless lightning and divine golden light supported the gap, preventing it from closing. Without a doubt, the space barrier that separated the mortal world and the heavenly realm was broken by the upper realm deities. Under the power of the heavenly axiom, the gap would naturally close. However, the upper realm deities used some unknown method to support the gap. Roar! Roar! The voice of a deity that seemed to come from beyond the 9 heavens came from the gap in the sky and scattered between heaven and earth. Suddenly, the archbishop, more than 200 white-robed priests, and hundreds of thousands of martial artists who had not sacrificed were all ecstatic. Everyone prostrated themselves on the ground respectfully, resisting the terrifying pressure, and kowtowed respectfully and devoutly. In the gap that was tens of thousands of miles long, among the golden thunder and divine light, a huge eyeball appeared out of thin air. It was a round red eyeball with a radius of 3,000 miles. There was a dark golden eyeball that was emotionless as it looked down coldly at heaven and earth. Chapter 27:33. Such a scene shocked the head ritual master. The 200 white-robed priests were also horrified. Their hearts were filled with fear. They had served the Heaven Crusaders for thousands of years and had hosted more than 10 grand sacrificial ceremonies. However, they had never seen such a scene. In the past grand sacrificial ceremonies, the upper realm deities could only send down endless divine light and an oracle occasionally. But now, an eyeball had appeared in the gap between the 2 realms. Just what kind of powerful existence was it, to actually have such a huge eyeball as big as a mountain? That cold and indifferent gaze contained a supreme, world-destroying might and power. Under the gaze of the eyeball, the entire imperial god palace was shrouded in endless divine power. The hundreds of thousands of sacrificial offerings in the square were too weak, and they exploded one after another, turning into a bloody mist that filled the sky. Even the bodies of more than 200 white-robed oracles started to crack, and the ground was covered in blood. In just 2 breaths, hundreds of white-robed priests could not withstand the terrifying divine power. Their divine bodies collapsed and turned into flesh and blood. Fortunately, the incomparably huge, cold and indifferent eyeball finally disappeared. The divine lightning and golden light in the sky also disappeared. The 10,000-mile-long gap quickly healed and returned to normal. The peerlessly terrifying divine might disappeared. The purple light that shot up to the sky from the altar gradually dissipated, and so did the mighty power. Rumble, following a series of loud and muffled noises, the entire altar shattered into pieces, collapsing into ruins all over the ground. The archbishop and the 100 white-robed priests quickly escaped from the ruins. They stood in the blood-soaked square and looked up at the sky in shock. It's over. The altar has collapsed, the grand sacrificial ceremony has been interrupted, and we have lost contact with the upper realm deities. Did we fail in the end? Everyone was filled with bewilderment, and they revealed expressions of deep despair and disappointment. Many white-robed priests could not take the blow. They knelt on the ground and cried in despair. The archbishop also looked at the sky in despair. His eyes were as red as blood, and 2 streams of blood flowed down from the corners of his eyes. Are we mortals so lowly that even the upper realm deities don't want to help us? The entire planet Heaven Crusher had more than 20 billion living beings. God, we have worshipped you so sincerely for 1,000 years, why are you so cold and heartless? Seeing the head ritual master's reaction, the more than 100 white-robed oracles became even sadder and more desperate. For a time, the huge square was filled with wailing sounds. Everyone was wailing as if they had lost their parents. However, they could only watch as planet Heaven Destroyer was about to be destroyed. There was nothing they could do. After a long time, Yun Shuiyan said in a low voice, "Tian Shu, there's no need to watch anymore. Things have already come to this. Even a divine emperor can't save them. Planet Heaven Destroyer is about to be destroyed. This is fate. We should leave to avoid being hurt by the aftermath. Mother will take you to other stars to recuperate and prepare for 10 years. Then, I will bring you to the God realm." Tian Shu looked at Planet Heaven Destroyer indifferently. His voice was cold and emotionless. He said in a low voice, I will remember this for the rest of my life. With Ji Tianqing's strength, he will soon be able to ascend to the God realm. I, Tian Shu, swear that even if I ascend to the God realm, I will use all means and all my strength to take revenge. Yun Shuiyan nodded slightly and said earnestly, a man should be brave after being humiliated. After this disaster, if you can pull yourself together and work hard, your future achievements will be limitless. Alright, let's go. After saying that, Yun Shuiyan turned to leave. Tian Shu was stunned for a moment. He took one last look at Planet Heaven Destroyer and turned to enter the battleship. However, it was that last look that made his body stiffen and he stopped abruptly. He could vaguely see that right above Planet Heaven Destroyer, thousands of miles away from the gravitational circle, a sacred golden light appeared in the void. Swoosh! Kaboom! Along with the appearance of the dazzling divine light, thousands of dark golden thunderbolts danced recklessly like wild dragons. Even though he was 30 million miles away, Tian Shu could sense that the dazzling golden light and thunderbolts contained supreme divine power. The golden light that covered the sky and the thousands of thunderbolts flashed and danced in the void, as if they were about to tear a hole in the void. Seeing this scene, Tian Shu was stunned for a moment. Then, his eyes widened and he revealed a look of pleasant surprise. Mother! Quick, look! The gods! The gods of the God realm are finally reacting. They didn't abandon us, they didn't abandon the Heaven Destroyer clan. Tian Shu shouted in ecstasy. His eyes were full of hope. Chapter 27:34. Yun Shuiyan had just turned around and walked a few steps when she heard Tian Shu's shout. She instinctively turned around and followed Tian Shu's gaze. She saw that there was indeed divine light and lightning flashing in the void. She was no stranger to this scene. It was the sign of communication between the gods and the heaven punishers during the grand sacrificial ceremony. We've finally made contact. Yun Shuiyan pursed her lips and smiled as if a burden had been lifted from her shoulders. When Tian Shu saw her smile, he said excitedly, Mother, I've finally seen you smile. Ever since he was born, Yun Shuiyan had spent most of her time in isolation. The number of times they had met could be counted on one hand. In Tian Shu's memory, he had never seen Yun Shuiyan smile before. Soon after, a series of loud rumbling sounds reverberated from the void. The dazzling golden light and divine lightning were tearing apart the barrier between the two worlds in an extremely violent manner. Yun Shuiyan and Tian Shu stood on the battleship and watched with anticipation. However, it took some time for the divine light to break through the void. Even the godly kings from the upper realm could not easily connect the two worlds. Yun Shuiyan and Tian Shu were anxious. They prayed in their hearts, hoping that the gods would open up the passage between the two worlds as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Planet Heaven Punisher did not slow down and finally rushed into the black hole's gravitational circle. The terrifying gravitational force immediately swallowed the endless purple light and spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Yun Shuiyan, Tian Shu, and Ji Tianqing could clearly see that the thin purple light that enveloped half of Planet Heaven Punisher was flowing into the gravitational circle like water. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth on Planet Heaven Punisher was also plundered by the gravitational circle. It turned into millions of colorful light ribbons and flew into the gravitational circle. Moreover, the terrifying gravitational force pulled Planet Heaven Punisher, causing it to fly even faster. After a short quarter of an hour, 1% of Planet Heaven Punisher had completely entered the gravitational circle. The purple light barrier and spiritual energy of heaven and earth disappeared in that area, turning it into a vacuum. Then, the endless forests, grasslands, and endless mountain ranges quickly disintegrated into debris and were swallowed by the gravitational circle. There was also an endless flood from the surging seas and rivers. The sky was collapsing, the earth was collapsing, and the mountains and rivers were collapsing rapidly, turning into dust. When the Earth that was tens of thousands of miles deep collapsed, the magma hidden in the depths of the Earth was like a red flood that left planet Heaven Punisher and flew into the gravitational circle. The Heaven Punishers living in that area left planet Heaven Punisher uncontrollably and flew into the gravitational circle. Of course, only a minority of those who flew into the gravitational circle in perfect condition. 99% of the Heaven Punishers had been torn to shreds by the terrifying gravity when they left planet Heaven Punisher. A terrifying disaster had arrived. Moreover, the disaster was spreading the disaster. Mountains, one after another, cities, and cities and tribes, one after another. A kingdom was destroyed, A's. And Tian, Shu, and Tian, had in a way. Yun Shuiyen and Tian Shu were burning with impatience, their eyes bulging with anger. The two of them glanced at planet Heaven Fa, which was being swallowed by the gravitational sphere, and then raised their heads to look at the divine light and lightning in the void. They felt even more anxious. Hurry up. Almighty God. I beg you to hurry up. The two of them could do nothing but pray devoutly. On the other side, Ji Tianqing stood in the void and watched all of this without any expression. He was calm. He was just waiting for the result. Originally, planet Heaven Punisher flew to the edge of the gravitational circle due to inertia and slowed down by 30%. Now that it's being pulled by the gravitational force, planet Heaven Punisher's speed is increasing and has recovered to its original speed. The more it enters the gravitational circle, the faster it will go. Based on the current situation, the entire planet Heaven Punisher will be swallowed in 10 to 12 hours at most. Ji Tianqing's plan would be completed in a few more hours. However, at that moment, he suddenly caught a glimpse of dazzling golden light and lightning flashing in the void to his left. Ji Tianqing was startled. He frowned and observed. He soon saw the clue and sensed the majestic and mighty divine might. Immediately, his expression became serious, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Such earth-shattering divine might far surpasses that of a heavenly god or even a godly lord. Only a godly king from the upper realm can do that. Damn it! The backer of the Heaven Punisher wants to interfere. In a short while, Ji Tianqing guessed the answer. He stared at the golden light and lightning without blinking. He thought to himself, it must be Yun Shuiyen and Tian Shu. They sensed that planet Heaven Punisher was about to be destroyed, so they used some method to contact their backer. The godly kings from the upper realm spent thousands of years in painstaking efforts to nurture the Heaven Punisher to its current scale. How could they let planet Heaven Punisher be destroyed? It was reasonable for the backer of the Heaven Punisher to save planet Heaven Punisher. Ji Tianqing was not surprised. He had even considered this problem a long time ago. However, he had always thought that under the heavenly Tao, the divine world and the mortal world were separated. Even a godly king from the upper realm could not interfere with the affairs of the mortal world. Just like back then, he was a peak godly king, but he could not interfere with the affairs of the five elements world. Now, the situation had become very special. The backer of the Heaven Punisher wanted to break the barrier between the two worlds and forcefully save planet Heaven Punisher. Ji Tianqing looked deeply at the golden light and lightning. He said in a low voice, I want to see which godly king is the backer of the Heaven Punisher. How dare they ignore the heavenly Tao's rules and attempt to break the passage between the two worlds and forcefully interfere with the affairs of the mortal world? Will they succeed? Are they not afraid of being punished by the heavenly Tao? Ji Tianqing's heart tightened. He stared at the void and waited for the result. If that godly king from the upper realm really broke the passage between the two worlds and saved planet Heaven Punisher, if that was the case, then he had reason to believe that the god realm had undergone an earth-shattering change. His previous views and knowledge were about to be overturned and refreshed. After a long wait, another 30 minutes passed. Planet Heaven Punisher had been devoured by 1/20th of Planet Heaven Punisher. Endless dust, gravel, and dregs, mixed with water and lava, gushed out of Planet Heaven Punisher and poured into the gravitational sphere. The ground was still cracking, the sky was still collapsing, and the mountains and rivers were quickly disappearing. Planet Heaven Punisher was gradually being destroyed. At this moment, a loud noise that reverberated through the universe suddenly exploded in the void. Kaboom! Yun Shuiyen and Tian Shu held their breaths when they heard the earth-shattering explosion. Their eyes widened in joy. On the other hand, Ji Tianqing's brows were tightly knitted as a trace of shock flashed through his eyes. Because, the sacred golden light and lightning tore a huge gap in the void in the distance. The gap was 10,000 miles long and 5,000 miles wide. Endless golden light and lightning filled the gap, preventing it from closing. The passage between the divine world and the mortal world had finally been opened. Chapter 27:35. Yun Shuiyen and Tian Shu felt their blood boil as they witnessed the tear in the void. As expected of the supreme godly king, he can ignore the heavenly laws and forcefully open a passage between the two worlds. Such means and power can affect the heavenly laws. This is unheard of. My son has such a powerful and heaven-defying master. Why should he worry about not reaching the peak of the divine path in the future? Yun Shuiyen was shocked and couldn't help but exclaim. Tian Shu was also shocked, his blood boiling in his chest. He cheered in a choked voice, "Mother, the godly king really did it." This time, not only did he send down divine light, but he also opened a passage between the two worlds. This is the first time in recorded history. No godly king has ever accomplished such a heaven-defying feat. Yun Shuiyen nodded slightly and exhorted, with such means, he's probably a first-rate overlord among the many godly kings in the god realm. Tian Shu, to be favored by the godly king is the greatest blessing in your life. You must cherish it. When you ascend to the god realm in the future, you must follow your master and serve him like a father. There was a subtle change in Tian Shu's expression as he muttered to himself, "Father died not long ago, and mother said this. Could it be that father isn't the most important person in her heart?" Although Tian Shu felt a little awkward. But he also understood that his empress mother wanted him to hug the big tree that was his Shizhuan. He quickly put the matter aside and looked expectantly at the gap. He asked, "Mother, since the godly king opened the passage between the two worlds, will he descend soon?" As long as he descends to planet heaven, all disasters will be eliminated. Ji Tianqing and his accomplices will also be easily killed by the godly king. Yun Shuiyen thought for a moment, then shook her head and explained, "Tian Shu, things aren't as simple as you think. The godly king must have used all his strength to open the passage. How could he descend to the mortal world? At least, the godly king's true body can't come to the mortal world. My guess is that the godly king would at most send down a projection of his avatar. That would be fortunate." Tian Shu was a little disappointed and asked, "Even if it's just a projection of His Majesty's avatar, he can still destroy stars with a flick of his finger. Killing Ji Tianqing and the others would be a piece of cake. Moreover, His Majesty the Divine King can't descend into the mortal realm, but he can send the divine monarchs and heavenly gods under his command to help us." Yun Shuiyen shook her head again and said with a wry smile, "Silly child. If even His Excellency the godly king cannot descend, what qualifications do those godly monarchs and heavenly gods have to descend?" "All right." Tian Shu was a little disappointed. He nodded and mumbled to himself, "I hope Master's clone is strong enough to save Heaven Fa Star." Meanwhile, Ji Tianqing also witnessed the emergence of the passageway between the two worlds. His expression became extremely gloomy, and his heart was filled with shock. "In the end, I underestimated the Heaven Punisher race's backer. He's even stronger than me in the past." He decisively went against the will of the heavenly Tao and broke through the passage between the two worlds. Such means had long surpassed peak divine kings and already came into contact with heavenly Tao rules. Who was it? What on earth did those god kings experience in the 1,000 years after my death? Ji Tianqing's emotions were very complicated. At that moment, he recalled what Yun Yao had said to him not long ago. Yun Yao had told him that she had a bad premonition and could even see the future. The upper realm's gods had interfered, and everyone's ending was miserable. At that time, Ji Tianqing did not believe it. However, now that it had happened, he had no choice but to believe it. When he thought of this, he could not help but sigh. Times have changed. The current world is no longer the same as it was in the past. I should have known that the Heaven Punisher race's backer could avoid the heavenly tribulation and influence and destroy heavenly Tao rules. Now, it's reasonable that they can open the passage between the two worlds. I just don't know which godly king will descend after the passage is opened. Or will he send a clone projection? Ji Tianqing was very clear about the godly king's divine powers and methods. He was not worried that the godly king would send a large group of heavenly gods or godly monarchs to descend. Because that was simply impossible. Even the godly king's true body could not descend to the mortal world. Even so, Ji Tianqing still had to prepare in advance. If the godly king sends a clone, with my current strength, I'm definitely no match for him. Even if he saves planet Heaven Punisher, there's nothing I can do. I can only leave this place first. Of course, Ji Tianqing was not in a hurry to leave. He still wanted to see what the godly king was going to do. How was he going to save planet Heaven Punisher? It would not be too late for him to leave this place after everything was over. Planet Heaven Punisher flew faster and faster. 1/10 of the area had already entered the gravitational circle. The sky and earth in that area had collapsed, turning into endless debris and dust that was swallowed up by the gravitational circle. A huge gap appeared in the huge planet Heaven Punisher. Monstrous magma and fire gushed out of the gap, burning all living things. The core of planet Heaven Punisher was also pulled by the violent gravitational force, becoming extremely irritable and unstable. Countless cracks appeared on the surface of the planet, and the remaining 3 continents kept collapsing. Under such a terrifying disaster, ordinary Heaven Punishers had no chance of survival. Large numbers of them died. Only a few martial gods were able to escape from planet Heaven Punisher. It seemed that the continents on planet Heaven Punisher were unstable and would soon fall apart. At this moment, the huge gap in the void suddenly lit up with an incomparably dazzling golden light. Roar! An angry roar that reverberated through the universe and shook the heavens suddenly came from the passageway between the two worlds. Then, a huge golden palm that covered the sky and covered the sun stretched out from the passageway. The huge golden palm streaked across the void at the speed of light and pressed down on planet Heaven Punisher in the blink of an eye. That's right. It was pressing, not slapping. The huge golden palm pressed down on planet Heaven Punisher's gap and unleashed a godly might that covered half of the planet. It also pushed planet Heaven Punisher out of the gravitational circle. Bam! Following a muffled explosion, golden light fragments burst out of the giant golden palm, filling the sky with golden light fragments. The gap in the heaven punishing star also exploded into thousands of ravines that spread in all directions. What shocked everyone even more was that planet Heaven Punisher, which had been flying at a high speed, suddenly slowed down. The Heaven FA star pushed the giant golden palm forward for 3 million miles before slowly coming to a stop. No matter how the black hole pulled, planet Heaven Punisher trembled. It was blocked by the huge golden palm and was unwilling to move forward. 2 short breaths later, a dignified, cold shout came from the passageway between the two worlds again, shaking the universe. The huge golden palm once again unleashed its godly might and pushed planet Heaven Punisher out of the gravitational circle. Chapter 2736. The Heaven Destroyer planet was stopped by the godly king's palm. Then, the godly king's palm pushed it back, gradually leaving the gravitational circle. This process caused a great impact on the Heaven Destroyer planet. Due to the inertia, the three seas of the Heaven Destroyer planet stirred up destructive waves and tsunamis. At least tens of millions of miles of land were submerged by the waves and tsunamis. Under the crumbling earth, endless lava was being squeezed out and splashed out, filling the sky. As a result, the surviving 20 billion Heaven Destroyers on the three continents were quickly reduced by a third. However, Yun Shuiyan and Tian Shu could accept this loss. After all, the Heaven Destroyer planet was saved, and more than 10 billion people were still alive. This was already a blessing in disguise. Half an hour later, the Heaven Destroyer planet was pushed out of the gravitational circle by the Godly King's palm and flew back 30 million miles. It was only now that the resplendent golden God King's palm dissipated. The Heaven Destroyer planet was safe for the time being. However, the disaster on the planet was not over yet, and the towering waves had yet to dissipate. The 10 billion survivors were still in extreme chaos and panic. They were running for their lives. Phew, we've finally saved it. On the Black Dragon warship, Yun Shuiyan and Tian Shu both heaved a sigh of relief. The heavy burden in their hearts had finally been lifted. Tian Shu's eyes lit up as he looked expectantly at the passage between the two worlds. He waved his fists and said, "The Heaven Destroyer planet has been saved. Will the Godly King appear next?" Yun Shuiyan was taken aback. She frowned and said, "The Heaven Destroyer planet has been saved. Ji Tianqing and his accomplices are nowhere to be seen. The Godly King may not appear." Tian Shu refused to believe it. He braced himself and retorted, "Mother, although we don't know where Ji Tianqing is hiding, the Godly King is omnipotent. He must know where Ji Tianqing is hiding and will find him and kill him." Yun Shuiyan only nodded slightly and did not say anything. After all, she and Tian Shu could not guess the Godly King's thoughts. There was no point in discussing it. In less than 10 breaths of time, the huge passage between the two worlds lit up with a sacred golden light again. Swoosh! Following the emergence of the golden light, a golden figure flew out from the passageway and hovered in the air. It was an unimaginably majestic phantom of a god, which was tens of thousands of miles tall. His appearance was similar to that of a human, with extremely muscular limbs and a muscular body. The size of its head was still relatively balanced, and it was very similar to a human's. However, he had 3 eyes and a huge red eyeball on his forehead. Other than that, he also had 6 large golden wings on his back, the lines of which were smooth and gorgeous. This was the appearance of a true deity. However, he was only an illusory figure condensed from golden light. It was the avatar projection that Yun Shuiyan had mentioned. Tian Shu's eyes widened when he saw the god spirit's shadow appear. He was overjoyed. "Ha ha ha. I knew that His Majesty would appear." Yun Shuiyan revealed a gratified smile as she nodded repeatedly. "It looks like His Majesty places great importance on this matter." Indeed, he sent a projection of his avatar. Tian Shu's mind was filled with fantasies as he said with great anticipation, "His Majesty must have discovered Ji Tianqing and wants to kill this culprit. When His Majesty has dealt with Ji Tianqing, I will kneel to him and thank him in person. I will call him Master. When that time comes, Master will be so happy that he might even reward me with a supreme divine ability." Thinking of this, Tian Shu's blood surged, and all the anger and resentment in his heart were swept away. Yun Shuiyan only quietly looked at the god spirit's shadow and did not break Tian Shu's fantasy. When the God King's palm pushed the Heaven Destroyer star out of the gravitational sphere, Ji Tianqing knew that the black hole plan had failed. He secretly shook his head and prepared to leave. Although he was a little disappointed, the Heaven Destroyer star had suffered heavy casualties and greatly damaged its vitality. In the short term, the Heaven Destroyer star could not even take care of itself and would most likely not invade other star regions. He planned to leave quietly and wait for the storm to subside before dealing with the Heaven Destroyer star. The plan failed because of the intervention of the God King from the upper realm. I don't believe that the God King from the upper realm will keep an eye on the Heaven Destroyer star. If the Heaven Destroyer star lives for a few more years, I will have other methods to destroy them. With this thought in mind, Ji Tianqing stepped into the void, turned around, and flew into the distance. However, at this moment, golden light surged out of the huge passage between the two worlds, and a 10,000-mile-tall God Spirit's shadow appeared. Ji Tianqing immediately stopped flying and turned his head to look at the God Spirit's shadow. He wanted to see which God King was backing the Heaven Destroyer star. 1,000 years ago, he had dominated the God Realm's 100 regions and was famous throughout the world. He knew or had heard of at least half of the God Kings. Therefore, he was confident that he could recognize which God King was backing the Heaven Destroyer star. However, when he saw the God Spirit's shadow clearly, he frowned. Its appearance is 80% similar to a human's, with divine eyes on its forehead and 6 wings on its back. This guy, among those great divine kings, none of them have this kind of appearance. Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a while. Suddenly, he smiled bitterly. This doppelganger projection is too common. Any God Lord or God King could have a doppelganger projection like this. In the God realm, once one reached the God Lord realm, one could create a doppelganger projection and travel freely in the God realm. Some God Lords and God Kings did not like to cultivate doppelganger superpowers, so they would not waste time on doppelganger techniques. The doppelganger projections that these experts created were mostly ordinary and very common. Naturally, the doppelganger projections did not have any special abilities or techniques. Only a small number of God Lords and God Kings were passionate about researching doppelganger techniques and would spend their time and energy. When these experts used doppelganger techniques, not only could they create tens of thousands of doppelgangers, but the doppelgangers' appearances were also very strange. Their doppelgangers even had all kinds of special abilities and effects. Ji Tianqing had researched doppelganger techniques in the past. He could create 9 doppelgangers instantly and use sword principle superpowers at the same time. The 9 doppelgangers were of different sizes. Some had 3 heads and 6 arms, some were 10,000 miles tall, and some were like dragons or phoenixes. They all had different abilities. So, when Ji Tianqing saw the doppelganger projection in the void, he was unable to determine which God King's doppelganger it belonged to. Unless he had the ability of a God Lord or above, he would be able to see through the doppelganger projection. He still had to familiarize himself with the aura of many God Kings' godheads before he could determine the doppelganger's owner based on the aura of the doppelganger. However, it was a pity that he had not even reached the heaven God realm. Naturally, he would not be able to recognize which God King was the doppelganger projection's owner. Forget it. It won't be too late to investigate this matter after I ascend to the God realm. Ji Tianqing shook his head and put away all the distracting thoughts in his head. He turned around and flew deep into the void. However, at this moment, the doppelganger projection that was 10,000 miles tall and had 6 wings on its back suddenly flapped its wings and flew towards Ji Tianqing as fast as the aurora. Chapter 2737. The Avatar came from the celestial world. After descending into the void, he had been searching for something. His eyes were bright, especially the 3rd crimson eyeball on his forehead. It glowed with a dark crimson light. His gaze enveloped the void, sweeping across 1,000,000 miles with a single glance. He could see through all illusions and disguises. In less than a minute, he had searched a radius of 100 million miles. It was also at this moment that he finally saw Ji Tianqing, who was flying 60 million miles away. Swoosh! Instantly, the Avatar's 3rd eyeball emitted an even more blinding red light. Without any hesitation, the Avatar immediately traversed the void and pounced towards Ji Tianqing. He was extremely fast, like an aurora streaking across the sky. In a second, he traversed a distance of 1,000,000 miles. The next moment, his body shimmered with golden light as he traversed another 1,000,000 miles with a single step. This speed was hundreds of times faster than Ji Tianqing, Yun Shuiyan, and Dubhe's teleporting. This was the might of a godly monarch's avatar. Furthermore, the avatar only had 10% of his strength in the celestial world. After descending into the mortal world, the avatar's strength was suppressed by the heavenly Tao laws. It was only 1/100th of the godly monarch's strength. Even so, he was still incomparably terrifying and exceeded the imagination of mortals. Yun Shuiyan and Dubhe stood on the Black Dragon battleship. When they saw this scene, they immediately revealed looks of shock and confusion. Heavens! Lord God King's avatar actually had such a terrifying divine ability. He can teleport 1,000,000 miles in a second. How terrifying is that? Dubhe was shocked and excited. His eyes flickered with fanatical worship. Yun Shuiyan was relatively calm as she explained calmly, His Majesty's avatar only has 10 to 20% of his strength. After descending into the mortal world, his strength will be suppressed by the heavenly Tao laws. He will be extremely weak. In the celestial world, the godly monarch can teleport close to 100,000,000 miles in a second. He can traverse an entire region in 2 hours. Heavens! Dubhe exclaimed once again. The worship on his face intensified. Yun Shuiyan stared intently at the godly monarch's avatar. She watched as he streaked through the void towards the east. She frowned and pondered for a moment. Then, she suddenly guessed something and her eyes lit up. Dubhe, hurry up and steer the Black Dragon warship. Let's chase after them and take a look. Ah! Tian Shu was taken aback and asked uncertainly, with our speed, how can we possibly catch up to the Divine King's clone? As Yun Shuiyan pulled him back to the battleship, she explained, the godly monarch's avatar flew east as though he was chasing something. Clearly, something happened. Mother guesses that the Divine King's clone must have discovered Ji Tianqing's whereabouts. When Tian Shu heard this, he was so excited that his blood was boiling. He secretly clenched his fist and said, just as I expected. That's great. Mother, let's hurry over right now. I want to see Ji Tianqing being killed by the Divine King's clone with my own eyes. After that, Sky Pivot entered the ship without hesitation and steered the ship toward the east. Ji Tianqing was speeding through the void. After flying for tens of thousands of miles, he realized that the situation was not good. A faintly discernible dangerous aura came from the void in the distance, lingering around his body. He felt a chill run down his spine as he subconsciously turned back to look. He saw the Divine King's clone chasing after him at an extremely terrifying speed. Damn it! That's just a clone. How can it have such a powerful divine will? I'm about 60,000,000 miles away from him. How can he discover me? Ji Tianqing knew very well that the range of a peak Divine King's divine will was the distance he could teleport within 3 breaths. It was about 150,000,000 miles. The Divine King's clone in the void had less than 10% of the Divine King's actual strength. The clone's divine will's range did not exceed 15,000,000 miles at most. It was precisely because of this that he was extremely safe when he was 60,000,000 miles away from the Divine King's clone. However, he never expected that the Divine King's clone would still discover him. Damn it! I really can't use common sense to estimate the Heaven Punisher race's backer. How could that doppelganger's divine sense detect me? Could it be that the third divine eye on his forehead has a special effect? It must be so. Just as these thoughts flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind, the distance between the two of them was shortened by another few million miles. Ji Tianqing estimated that even if he fled with all his might, he would be caught in 100 breaths at most. Whether it was flying at full speed or teleporting, it would be useless. Moreover, that Divine King's clone's strength clearly surpassed the Heaven God realm. Ji Tianqing felt even more pressure. He knew that he was no match for that divine king's clone and could only think of other ways. However, no matter how he thought about it, other than the Heavenly Star Shuttle, there was no other way to escape. It looks like I can only use the Heavenly Star Shuttle and jump to the nearest star to escape the Divine King's clone's pursuit. Thinking of this, he took out the Heavenly Star Shuttle from his interspatial ring and held it in his hand. He turned back to look at the void. That Divine King's clone was still chasing after him. It was only 40 million miles away. Ji Tianqing gritted his teeth and prepared to activate the Heavenly Star Shuttle. However, at this moment, he thought of another problem. Right, I don't recognize which Divine King that clone belongs to. However, many Divine Kings in the upper realm recognize me. Chapter 2738. Ji Tianqing had only used the Heavenly Star Shuttle twice. Based on the previous two experiences, he roughly understood the function of the Heavenly Star Shuttle. It was to bring him across space and teleport him to the nearest star. In the vast void, this Heavenly Star Shuttle was indeed the best escape tool. Ji Tianqing thought that the Heavenly Star Shuttle should have teleported him to a barren star hundreds of millions of miles away. At that time, even if the Divine King's clone desperately chased after him, he would still have a chance to escape. But he never thought that the heavens would play a joke on him. The Heavenly Star Shuttle actually sent him back to planet Heaven. All around him was shattered earth, behind him were collapsed mountains, and in the distance were surging waves. Red lava was spewing out from the cracks in the earth under his feet. Such a harsh environment was like the end of the world. Where else could this be but planet Heaven? Motherf ****. It really teleported me to the nearest star. Even Ji Tianqing, who had always been calm and collected, could not help but curse. Moreover, he emphasized the words nearest as if he was angry and helpless. Just now, he was only a few million miles away from planet Heaven in the void. The nearest star to him was indeed planet Heaven. There was nothing wrong with it. Ji Tianqing had a headache, but there was nothing he could do. After all, the Heavenly Star Shuttle was not a Heavenly Star Shuttle that he had refined, and he had only used it twice. Strictly speaking, he did not know much about the Heavenly Star Shuttle. It was reasonable for such a blunder to occur. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing had temporarily escaped the pursuit of the Divine King's clone. But he did not dare to slack off. He hurriedly dived underground and flew in the opposite direction. He could not stay on planet Heaven. Sooner or later, he would be found by the Divine King's clone. The most important thing now was to escape from the other side of planet Heaven as soon as possible. After diving underground, Ji Tianqing used the power of the realm and instantly teleported millions of miles away, traveling rapidly underground. Unfortunately, he had only refined 40% of the power of the realm. If it was like the Five Elements realm, he could completely control it. Or, if he was in the core of the world, he could use the power of the world to directly move to the westernmost point of planet Heaven FA. In that case, he would be 700 million miles away from the godly monarch's clone. No matter what, it was impossible for the Divine King's clone to catch up to him. The God King's avatar was speeding through the void, rapidly closing in on Ji Tianqing. However, he did not expect that Ji Tianqing would disappear into thin air. The sudden turn of events startled him, causing him to stop in midair. He frowned and scanned the surrounding tens of millions of miles, but didn't see Ji Tianqing. This caused him to reveal a puzzled and surprised expression as he muttered to himself, "This person actually disappeared into thin air. Could it be that he had used a spatial artifact to escape? No. How could a divine artifact from the mortal world teleport 60 million miles? That kid is most likely hiding. Wait for this emperor to search, and I'll definitely be able to drag him out." After saying this, the third eye on the God King avatar's forehead began to emit a dazzling red light as it began to search the void. In just a short while, his divine eye had already searched 60 million miles. The result made him even more surprised. Ji Tianqing had actually disappeared completely. Damn it, that kid actually escaped from under my nose. Impossible. He must be hiding somewhere. The God King's avatar muttered to himself as he scanned the surroundings with a sharp gaze. Suddenly, his gaze landed on the Heaven Punisher planet that was quietly floating a few million miles away from his feet. He had already searched the surrounding 60 million miles, but he had overlooked the Heaven Punisher planet. The God King's avatar raised his eyebrows and suddenly had a thought. The most dangerous place is the safest place. No one would believe that the kid would escape back to the Heaven Punisher planet, right? When he thought of this, the God King's avatar sneered as he turned around and flew back to the Heaven Punisher planet. Swoosh! In just a few breaths' time, he had only taken 6 steps and stepped into the Heaven Punisher planet. Then, the God King's avatar stood high in the sky and released thousands of strands of divine consciousness that merged with heaven and earth. A God King elite had unbelievable power and divine abilities. He could see through the mysteries of an entire planet in just a few breaths' time. Although the God King's avatar only had 1% of the original body's power, he had supreme divine abilities. It was very easy for him to see through the mysteries of the Heaven Punisher planet. In just 5 breaths' time, the God King's avatar sensed a strong dragon tribe aura in a certain area on the continent east of the Heaven Punisher planet. I guessed right. That cunning little bastard really escaped back to the Heaven Punisher planet. Swoosh! He used his divine ability without hesitation and instantly teleported 90 million miles away. The power of the mortal world is simply too weak and thin. My avatar has only 1% of the original body's power, but it can still teleport close to 100 million miles away. Ha ha ha. That damn dragon human brat, I'd like to see how you're going to escape from me. The God King's avatar sneered. In just a few breaths' time, he had teleported to the target area. He appeared on a shattered piece of land. Behind him was a mountain range that had turned into ruins, and in front of him was a chaotic sea. The God King's avatar stood on the spot and released his divine consciousness to investigate carefully for 10 breaths' time. Then, his divine consciousness found that there was a large amount of divine dragon aura underground that formed a straight line to the west. This kid is not stupid. He guessed that I would track him here, so he went to the west of the Heaven Punisher planet. But so what? He will still die in the end. The God King's avatar sneered. He used his teleportation divine ability again and chased after him 90 million miles away. As time passed, the distance between the two of them quickly shortened. After 100 breaths' time, the distance between the God King's avatar and Ji Tianqing had shortened to 8 million miles. At this moment, the God King's avatar's divine consciousness had already locked onto Ji Tianqing. His appearance, temperament, and divine power were all memorized by the God King's avatar. As long as Ji Tianqing was still on the Heaven Punisher planet, the God King's avatar would be able to catch up to him no matter where he went. No matter where he hid, the God King's avatar would be able to find him. Ji Tianqing also sensed danger approaching and sensed the God King's avatar's aura. His face became gloomy and he was a little anxious as he thought about how to get rid of the God King's avatar. On the other side, in the void, Yun Shuiyan and Tian Shu were steering the Black Dragon battleship and wanted to follow the God King's avatar to check out the situation. Seeing the God King's avatar turn around and fly back to the Heaven Punisher planet, the mother and son were confused and quickly turned around. At the same time, in the void 100 million miles away from the Heaven Punisher planet, a black battleship was silently approaching. It was the Tianqing battleship. Bai Long was steering the battleship at full speed. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Ji Wuhan and Ji Wushuang had already put on their Origin Stone divine armors and took out their Origin Stone divine weapons. Xian Yu, Black Dragon, Azure Li and Lan Kuan, the 4 divine beasts, were also rubbing their palms and looking eager. End of this chapter. Chapter 27:39. A quarter of an hour passed quickly. Ji Tianqing had already traveled 300 million miles underground and arrived at the center of the Heaven Punisher planet. At this moment, he was traveling through the dark rock layers 10,000 miles underground. Unfortunately, the God King's clone had already caught up. He was 30,000 miles behind him. This distance was already very close to the God King's clone. "Aunt, I have arrived in the mortal world. Why don't you stop and accept your death?" The God King's clone glared at Ji Tianqing and roared in a dignified tone. Even though he was speaking in the common language of the God realm, Ji Tianqing could understand him. He immediately frowned and thought to himself, Which God King in the God realm would dare to call himself that? This person is really arrogant and conceited. In the God realm, true gods and heavenly gods often referred to themselves as I. Divine lords referred to themselves as I or while God Kings referred to themselves as I or I. Ji Tianqing had been in the God realm for hundreds of years, but he had never heard the term I. However, he pretended not to hear the God King's clone's angry shout and increased his speed to escape. The God King's clone's eyes were cold and indifferent. He looked at Ji Tianqing as if he was looking at a dead man. "Ignorant ant, go to hell." This time, he spoke in the language of the Heaven Punisher tribe so that Ji Tianqing could understand him. As he finished speaking, he suddenly raised his right hand and grabbed at Ji Tianqing. Boom! Suddenly, the rock layers and soil around Ji Tianqing condensed into an extremely hard wall and pressed down on him. Lava shot out from the depths of the ground under his feet and was about to swallow him up. The God King's clone had already mastered all kinds of divine Tao laws. He could control heaven and earth with a raise of his hand. On this planet, he was an omnipotent god. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion erupted from underground. The rocks, mud, and magma within 30,000 miles collided with one another, drowning Ji Tianqing's figure in it. The terrifying force of the collision turned the ground within a radius of 30,000 miles into dust. A destructive shockwave erupted from the ground, turning the area within a radius of 100,000 miles into a vacuum. The God King's avatar believed that this casual move of his could instantly kill Ji Tianqing. However, his divine telekinesis detected that the terrifying magma, mud, and rock did not harm Ji Tianqing at all. Ji Tianqing was like a transparent phantom, allowing the magma and mud to pass through his body without any delay. Amidst the earth-shattering explosions, he used the power of the world to teleport another 6 million kilometers. The godly king's avatar's divine sense had always covered the surrounding tens of millions of miles. Of course he could see that Ji Tianqing had escaped unharmed, appearing in the depths of the underground 6 million li away. This result caused him to furrow his brows and reveal an expression of disbelief. Such an ant actually managed to dodge my attack. Did he master the laws of Earth? No wonder he can travel freely underground and ignore my attack. A mere true god can also master the laws of Earth and control the power of the Heaven Punisher planet. This kid is quite capable. No wonder he can force the Heaven Punisher race to such an extent. The God King's avatar thought for a moment and understood the reason. He was quite shocked. Even his chosen representative in the mortal world, the Heaven Punisher Great Emperor, did not have this ability. The God King's avatar teleported again and crossed more than 6 million li in one step to block Ji Tianqing's path. Take this! The God King's avatar roared angrily. He suddenly raised his palms and smacked down on Ji Tianqing's head. Instantly, a pair of enormous golden palms covered the sky and engulfed Ji Tianqing's figure. Under the divine golden light, everything within a radius of tens of thousands of miles was sealed. The space also froze like ice. Even if Ji Tianqing wanted to teleport away, he could not. At this critical moment, he could only cast a spell to block. Lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Ji Tianqing roared and immediately used the laws of earth. He absorbed the divine power within hundreds of thousands of miles to form a giant dark yellow shield to protect himself. Boom! Crack! In the next instant, the two enormous palms smashed down and hit him. Following an earth-shattering explosion, the dark yellow shield was smashed into pieces on the spot, splashing out countless fragments. Ji Tianqing was also smashed deep into the ground. He was trapped in a torrent of lava tens of thousands of miles underground. The violent shockwave turned everything within 100,000 li to dust, creating a giant underground hole. The ground also shook violently as if there was a super earthquake. Ji Tianqing had used all his strength to block the God King's avatar's attack. However, the God King's avatar was too powerful. It was more than 20 times more powerful than him. In the end, he was still injured. His internal organs were damaged, and his divine power was in chaos. Cough, cough, he coughed violently, and golden divine blood flowed out of his mouth and nose. His face was slightly pale. He hurriedly circulated his energy to suppress his injuries. Fortunately, he maintained the heavenly dragon tyrant body state. His defensive power was very strong. Otherwise, that move just now could have seriously injured him. The God King's avatar originally thought that the battle was over. But when he scanned with his divine will, he discovered that Ji Tianqing only suffered some light injuries. He immediately frowned. His third eyeball flashed with red light. This emperor really misjudged. This mixed-blood bastard is only a half-step celestial deity, but he has strength comparable to a level 5 celestial deity. He was a rare genius that no one had ever seen before in this world. In comparison, Tian Shu, that punk, is too inferior. At this moment, the God King's avatar suddenly had a different thought. He could not quite bear to kill Ji Tianqing. He was invincible in the divine world and had seen countless breathtaking geniuses. But someone like Ji Tianqing, living in the lowly mortal world and not dying after taking 2 of his moves with the body of an ant, was one of a kind. The God King's avatar dared to conclude that in the trichiliocosm, this dragon-human punk before him was absolutely the most monstrous genius. Even in the divine world where geniuses were as common as clouds, he was also one of the top geniuses. His future achievements were limitless. If not for this punk going against this emperor would have taken him in as a disciple. The God King's avatar muttered to himself. Once again, he waved his palm and fired out a divine golden light toward Ji Tianqing. This time, he still held back like before and did not use his full strength. He was not in a hurry to kill Ji Tianqing. Instead, he wanted to see what other moves Ji Tianqing had. 2 mountain-sized golden palms, condensed like metal and stone, slammed toward the sea of lava with unparalleled divine might. Ji Tianqing was in the sea of lava. He had just suppressed the injuries of his internal organs and was about to teleport away. Suddenly, he saw 2 giant palms slamming toward him. Without hesitation, he pulled out the burial of heaven and stabbed out with his strongest attack. Heaven-piercing sword. The burial of heaven instantly swelled to 10,000 feet long, emitting a dazzling golden divine light as it pierced toward the 2 giant palms. Boom! Crack! In the next instant, the sword light and the giant palms collided fiercely. An earth-shattering boom erupted, spreading across a radius of 100,000 miles. The golden palms and sword light collapsed at the same time, bursting out millions of golden light fragments, blasting a huge pit of 100,000 miles in the sea of lava. Chapter 2740. A loud noise shook the heavens, and crimson lava splashed everywhere. The depths of the earth were in chaos, and a terrifying earthquake was also triggered on the surface. Ji Tianqing was once again sent flying backward, crashing into the sea of lava with a rumble. The injuries to his internal organs had just been suppressed, and he was severely injured again. He couldn't help but spit out 2 mouthfuls of golden divine blood, and he panted violently. Seeing that the Divine King's clone was about to attack again, he had no time to circulate his energy to suppress his injuries. He could only absorb the life-saving divine light of the heaven-mending pearl. Swoosh! The dense white light entered his internal organs, and he immediately recovered to his original state. When the Divine King's clone raised his fists and blasted out 2 mountain-sized fist lights, he didn't hesitate to control the power of the world and leave the ground. Swoosh! With a flash of light, he flew to a height of 90,000 miles in the sky. Deep underground, the 2 destructive fist lights brazenly blasted into the sea of lava, and a deafening loud noise erupted. A huge pit was blasted out of the sea of lava, and the surrounding rock layers also collapsed one after another. The Divine King's clone's attack missed, and the corners of his mouth curled into a playful sneer, and he said, "Haha, interesting." In the next instant, he also teleported to a height of 90,000 miles in the sky, and once again swung his palm at Ji Tianqing. 2 huge golden light blades, as if splitting heaven and earth, attacked Ji Tianqing. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth within a radius of 100,000 miles was sucked dry. The space in this area was also confined. Ji Tianqing's aura was locked onto by the light blades, and he couldn't dodge or teleport away. Even if he used the power of the world, it was useless. The Divine King's clone's methods were so powerful, and it was already within his expectations, so he didn't find it strange at all. At the critical moment, he could only grit his teeth and resist, casting a technique to resist. Sword of Life. He used all his strength, and swung the sword of burial of heaven, and stabbed out with his strongest sword. The sword light, which seemed to fly from the sky, carried a majestic and mighty divine might, and instantly slashed the 2 light blades. Boom! Crack! The golden light blade and sword light collapsed at the same time, and fragments scattered all over the sky. The violent shockwave sent Ji Tianqing flying thousands of miles away. His chest heaved up and down rapidly. The Divine King's clone did not move at all. He stared at Ji Tianqing with a strange light in his eyes. He thought to himself, this child's sword technique is quite interesting. It doesn't seem like it can be grasped by a true god. Could it be that this boy obtained some fortuitous encounter and learned the sword Tao of an ancient divine lord? At the same time, deities who cultivated this Tao tended to grasp many divine abilities and mystic arts that could heal injuries quickly. Several of the strongest people in the longevity path reached the God-King realm and even had the heaven-defying effect of reviving the dead. Therefore, when the God-King's avatar saw Ji Tianqing's transformation, he associated it with the longevity path. A mere ant from the mortal world is actually a dragon human. Not only did he grasp heavenly god-level laws, but he also cultivated the unfathomable sword Tao divine abilities and longevity path divine abilities. I really want to see if you're reincarnated from the upper realm, kid. The God-King's avatar could not help but suspect that a monster like Ji Tianqing could not possibly be born in the mortal world. He was most likely the reincarnation of an upper realm expert. Since that was the case, all the more he had to investigate Ji Tianqing's background. Therefore, the God-King's avatar used 70% of his strength. His body transformed into dozens of light shadows, pouncing toward Ji Tianqing. Swoosh! 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 Instantly, the sky was filled with his illusions. Thousands of fist lights, leg shadows, and sword lights also burst forth with supreme divine might, pouring down like a torrential rain. Ji Tianqing narrowed his eyes, his expression incomparably solemn. He could only block and retreat into the distance. Just as Ji Tianqing and the God-King's avatar were fighting, the Black Dragon battleship had also returned to Planet Traitor. Yun Shuiyan and Tian Shu could guess that there must be a reason for the God-King's avatar to enter Planet Traitor. However, they were weak and could not detect the God-King's avatar's aura, nor did they know where he was. The mother and son discussed for a moment, then decided to return to the Emperor God Palace to stabilize the situation. At this moment, Tianqing's battleship arrived as scheduled and was about to enter Planet Trader. Inside the battleship, Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the two children all had solemn expressions, revealing worried expressions. Ji Ku held the divine spear in his hand and said in a low voice, "Before Brother Tianqing carried out the plan, he asked us to stay in the Five Elements world and wait for his news. However, half a month has passed, and he has not returned, nor has he sent a message. Half an hour ago, I sent him a communication jade slip, but he hasn't replied yet. All signs indicate that he must have encountered some trouble, or even fallen into a predicament. We have to help him as soon as possible." Everyone nodded in unison to express their understanding. Yun Yao nodded slightly and said, "I have a trace of connection with Tianqing, and I can sense his aura. He should be on Planet Trader. However, Planet Trader is too big, and we don't have that much time to search. Therefore, we have to go directly to the Emperor God Palace of the Heaven Trader and find Yun Shuiyan and Tian Shu." Chapter 2741. Swoosh. Under Bai Long's control, the Tianqing battleship entered the planet of Heaven Killer at an extremely fast speed. Soon, the Tianqing battleship stopped 10,000 miles above the ground. Ji Ku flew out of the battleship in a flash and landed on the ground below. On the shattered ground, there was a city that had collapsed into ruins. Many members of the Heaven Killer were fleeing outside the city, and countless injured people were wailing inside the city. Not far away, two Heaven Killer battleships sped over. They were the soldiers of the Heaven Killer race who had been ordered to rescue the injured and comfort the people. However, as soon as the two battleships flew over the ruins, they were pierced by two spear shadows that fell from the sky. Boom! Boom! The fiery red spear shadows destroyed the two battleships on the spot and blew them into pieces. The black-armored warriors in the battleships were blown to smithereens. The remaining two martial gods in golden armor were severely injured too. Blood was gushing out of their bodies. The two of them were furious and terrified. They quickly pulled out their swords and sabers and vigilantly searched for the enemy. But neither of them found anything. Ji Ku descended from the sky and teleported behind one of the martial gods, knocking him out with a spear strike. The other martial god reacted and turned around to run without hesitation. Ji Ku chased after him and swept her spear again, knocking the martial god unconscious. Then, she carried the two unconscious martial gods and returned to the battleship high in the sky. Plop! Plop! Ji Ku entered the battleship and threw the two martial gods on the ground. Bai Long couldn't wait any longer. He immediately used the soul-searching technique to seize the memories of the two martial gods. Everyone remained silent and looked at him expectantly. After 100 breaths of time, White Dragon finished casting the spell and opened his eyes. The corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. He casually threw out two balls of divine flame and burned the two martial gods to ashes. "Bai Long, have you found anything? Where is the Arch Palace of the Heaven Killer race?" Yun Yao and Ji Ku both asked. Bai Long pointed to the west and said with a smile, "The Emperor God Palace is in the Endless Sea region, above the sky where the clouds gather. One of them doesn't know anything, while the other knows the approximate location of the Arch Palace." Ji Ku nodded and urged, "Then what are we waiting for? Let's go." White Dragon did not waste any more time and hurriedly drove the battleship to the Endless Sea domain at the fastest speed. Fortunately, they were lucky enough to land not far away from the sea. In just a short 4 hours, the Tianqing battleship arrived above the sea and began searching through the vast sea of clouds. Not only did they search with their eyes, but they also released their divine consciousness to cover a radius of 90,000 miles to find the whereabouts of the Arch Palace. It didn't take long for Yun Yao to get the results. 90,000 miles to the left, a magnificent palace stood in the sea of clouds. She pointed out the direction, and White Dragon hurriedly piloted the warship and flew over. When the battleship approached the Imperial God Palace, White Dragon activated the formation and made the battleship invisible. The battleship flew silently to the Imperial God Palace, and everyone secretly checked the situation in the Imperial God Palace. Although Planet Heaven Destroyer had suffered a disaster and half of the planet had been reduced to ruins, the Imperial God Palace above the Sea of Clouds was protected by a heavenly god-level formation, so it was still intact. However, it was chaotic inside and outside the Imperial God Palace. Thousands of Heaven Destroyer battleships were flying in and out in a hurry. Of course, most of them departed from the Imperial God Palace and headed to various continents. In the Imperial God Palace, there were batches of Heaven Destroyer soldiers who quickly gathered and boarded the battleships to leave. Even the guards guarding the Imperial God Palace were extremely busy. They were shuttling back and forth as if they were carrying out some mission. Looking at the situation, Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others guessed the reason. Planet Heaven Destroyer must have suffered a disaster. The continents are in chaos, and the people are in a terrible situation. Countless Heaven Destroyer soldiers have gathered in the Imperial God Palace, and they are now rushing to various continents to provide relief. Although those Heaven Destroyer soldiers are very busy, as if they are rushing to be reincarnated, they are not in a mess. This means that there are experts guarding the Imperial God Palace, and they are giving orders in an orderly manner. Bai Long nodded in agreement. He sneered and said, "The Heaven Destroyer clan is now an arrow at the end of its flight, and they are on the verge of extinction. The only experts who can stand on the stage are Yun Shuiyen, Tian Shu, and her son. In my opinion, that pair of mother and son should be in the Imperial God Palace. Let's kill our way in, destroy the Imperial God Palace, and capture Yun Shuiyen and her son. Then, we will know where Master is." Ji Tianqing was not around, so Yun Yao was the backbone of everyone. She nodded slightly in agreement and said in a serious tone, "Although only Yun Shuiyen and Tian Shu can pose a threat to us, there are hundreds of thousands of Heaven Destroyer soldiers in the Imperial God Palace. However, there are at least hundreds of thousands of soldiers in the Divine Palace. We have to be careful and have a clear plan and goal to succeed. I will now assign the tasks, and everyone must do their best to complete them." Then, Yin Yao assigned the tasks to everyone. She and Ji Ku charged into the Imperial God Palace and worked together to break the defensive array. Their main goal was to deal with Tian Shu and Yun Shuiyen. Ji Wuhan and Ji Wushuang followed by Long and charged into the Imperial God Palace from the side. Their mission was to destroy the battleships as soon as possible. The four divine beasts entered from the side and the back, and they were responsible for eliminating the guards and soldiers in the Imperial God Palace. After the miscellaneous fish were cleared, everyone gathered in the center of the Imperial God Palace. No one had any objections, and they immediately set off. Swoosh! With a flash, Yun Yao and Ji Ku flew out of the battleship. Both of them were wearing pitch-black Source Stone battle armors. They held Source Stone swords and divine spears as they flew straight to the main gate of the Imperial God Palace. There were hundreds of battleships and thousands of Heaven Destroyer soldiers gathered outside the gate. However, the two of them remained invisible and used a secret technique to observe the defensive array. Then, they began to crack it. Many years ago, Ji Tianqing had taught them how to crack the powerful divine array of the Heaven Destroyer clan. Now, both of them were half-step heavenly gods and had heavenly god-level Source Stone divine weapons. It was a piece of cake for them to crack the defensive array of the Imperial God Palace. 100 seconds later. With a loud crack, Yun Yao and Ji Ku broke a hole in the heavenly god array protecting the Imperial God Palace. On the purple light screen that had a radius of hundreds of miles, a 10 miles long and thousands of meters wide gully appeared. Violent purple godly power seeped out of the gap and fell into the sea of clouds. The Heaven Destroyer soldiers outside the gate were stunned. Then, everyone roared and exclaimed as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Yun Yao and Ji Ku attacked decisively. They swung their swords and spears and drowned thousands of Heaven Destroyer soldiers. Boom! 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 A deafening explosion immediately exploded in the sea of clouds, causing the Emperor God Palace to shake endlessly. With one move, more than 3,000 soldiers of the heaven-punishing army were killed on the spot. There were deafening roars and roars in the Imperial God Palace, as well as ear-piercing alarms. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the 4 divine beasts went through the gap and got into the array. They quickly rushed to the side and the back of the Imperial God Palace. Chapter 27:42. Yunyao had already assigned the tasks. Everyone and the 4 divine beasts each had their own tasks, trying to achieve the goal in the shortest time possible. The 4 divine beasts rushed into the Arch Palace and rushed to the right and back. They bumped into thousands of heaven-punishing guards, who were rushing to the main gate to provide support. The 4 mythological beasts didn't hesitate at all. They immediately released a destructive divine light that slaughtered hundreds of guards. Many guards were shocked. They couldn't care less about the gate and immediately attacked the 4 divine beasts. Qian Yu and Lu Li stayed to deal with more than 6,000 guards. Black Dragon and Lan Kuan rushed out of the encirclement and rushed to the back of the Arch Palace. On the other side, on the left side of the Arch Palace, Bai Long drove the battleship and flew out of the purple light shield with Ji Wuhan and Ji Wushuang. They didn't rush in from the gate, because Bai Long was confident that he could break the divine formation. He controlled the Tianqing battleship and activated the 2 main cannons at the front of the battleship, aiming at the purple light shield. Kaboom! As the 2 dazzling golden light beams blasted out, the purple light shield was immediately blasted open, and endless debris splashed out. The incomparably violent impact caused the entire light barrier to tremble. The 2 dazzling golden light beams also didn't dissipate. They passed through the purple light shield and blasted into the Arch Palace. With a muffled rumble, several palaces collapsed and turned into ruins. Naturally, more than 1,000 guards and servants died on the spot and were blasted into powder by the dazzling golden light beams. Swoosh! The Tianqing battleship was as fast as lightning. It passed through the gap in the formation and rushed into the Arch Palace. At this time, a large number of guards and soldiers rushed out of the Arch Palace with murderous intent. Seeing the Tianqing battleship break into the Arch Palace, everyone immediately locked onto the target and attacked the battleship. However, the overwhelming purple light blades and all kinds of divine powers and secret arts couldn't do anything to the Tianqing battleship. They couldn't even leave a mark on the battleship, let alone damage it. On the other hand, the divine cannons on both sides of the battleship opened up and shot out dazzling golden light beams, blasting the guards and soldiers of the heaven-conquering army into pieces. The Tianqing battleship at full power was simply the most violent killing machine. Not only were thousands of guards and heaven-punishing soldiers killed, but they were also forced to flee in panic. Even the palaces and buildings within a radius of dozens of miles were blasted into ruins by the beams of light, leaving only deep pits and broken walls. The battle at the entrance of the Emperor God Palace was the most intense. Yunyao wielded her sword with both hands and multitasked. She executed 2 types of sword Dao divine arts at the same time, spraying out sword lights that blotted out the sky. With her as the center, the surrounding area was filled with sword light. She was like a moving hurricane of blades, violently sweeping across the battlefield. All the soldiers of the heaven-punishing army that were swept by the hurricane were crushed into pieces, and blood rained down from the sky. Ji Ku wielded the Origin Stone divine spear and started a massacre in the sky. Hundreds of heaven-punishing battleships were gathered here, ready to set off, but they were all destroyed by her. With a wave of the divine spear, monstrous divine flames poured down, drowning many soldiers of the heaven-punishing army and burning them to ashes in an instant. With a thrust of the divine spear, the terrifying spear shadows enveloped many battleships and pierced them into sieves in the blink of an eye. They were like piles of scrap metal. The two war goddesses used all their strength and unleashed destructive power that could destroy the world. The surrounding battleships and soldiers of the heaven-punishing army couldn't stop them at all and were quickly slaughtered. The battle lasted for about 15 minutes. More than half of the 800 battleships were destroyed. Only 200 battleships escaped from the Emperor God Palace and escaped the disaster. About 40,000 soldiers of the heaven-punishing army were also slaughtered. The rest either fled the Emperor God Palace with the battleships or supported other places. More than 10,000 soldiers of the heaven-punishing army stayed near the main entrance. However, they were terrified and didn't dare to face Yun Yao and Ji Ku head-on. They could only retreat into the Emperor God Palace. When the situation was critical and the soldiers of the heaven-punishing army lost their will to fight, an earth-shattering roar came from the depths of the Emperor God Palace. Ji Tianqing's henchmen, you're digging your own grave. As the roar came, a tall figure covered in purple flames flew out from the depths of the Emperor God Palace. Swish! In the blink of an eye, the figure arrived above the square. That person was 10 feet tall and his body was black and covered with icy blue patterns. His body was full of murderous intent. Without a doubt, he was Tian Shu. Tian Shu had thought that the disaster of the heaven-punishing planet would be over when the Divine King's avatar came to the mortal world. Then, the Divine King's avatar would be invincible and kill Ji Tianqing. That would be the end of the story. If the Divine King's avatar was free, he would meet him and hear him call him master and give him all kinds of divine powers and divine artifacts. That would be perfect. However, things didn't go as planned. Before Tian Shu could finish cleaning up the mess in the Emperor God Palace, Ji Tianqing's henchmen had arrived. How dare they? They must have a death wish. The most infuriating thing was that the 100,000 soldiers, thousands of battleships, and thousands of guards in the Emperor God Palace couldn't defeat Ji Tianqing's henchmen. Tian Shu had no choice but to put down what he was doing and join the battle in person. Other government affairs, such as deploying troops, protecting the heaven-punishing planet, and investigating the whereabouts of the Divine King's avatar, were all left to his mother, Yun Shuiyan. The more than 10,000 heaven-destroying soldiers around the square heaved a sigh of relief when they saw Tian Shu appear in person. They looked as if they had been relieved of a heavy burden. The Thearcha's son is finally here. That's great. As long as the Thearcha's sun strikes, those two bitches will definitely die. No matter how big the disaster is, don't even think about defeating the heaven-punishing planet. The Thearcha's son is mighty. Kill those two bastards. Many captains and soldiers of the heaven-punishing army were cheering in high spirits, anticipating the scene of Yun Yao and Ji Ku being killed. Tian Shu didn't waste any time. He summoned the Poseidon's halberd with his right hand and charged toward Ji Ku. Ji Ku was wearing armor and holding a divine spear. Her body was wrapped in divine flames and she looked the most valiant. Moreover, she specialized in dealing with the heaven-punishing battleships. Her killing power was terrifying. Naturally, she became Tian Shu's primary target. Bitch, die. Tian Shu roared and waved the Poseidon's halberd at Ji Ku. In an instant, dozens of purple lights were shot out and more than 30 purple light blades were shot out. Dozens of purple lights burst out with unparalleled power and engulfed Ji Ku's figure. Countless soldiers clapped and cheered for Tian Shu. However, Ji Ku held the divine spear tightly with both hands and instantly shot out hundreds of beams of divine light. She used 4 types of divine flames. Only a burst of peng 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 muffled sounds burst out, and the purple light that filled the sky was defeated, but Ji Ku was safe and sound. Not only that, but she also teleported in front of Tian Shu and stabbed more than 200 times with her divine spear. The sky was covered by divine flames. Tian Shu was shocked and could only block with all his might. However, he was only able to block half of the attacks and was hit by more than 30 spear shadows. He spat out blood and was sent flying. The cheers of the heaven-destroying soldiers in the square suddenly stopped. Their faces were filled with astonishment. Chapter 27:43. The square was dead silent. More than 10,000 soldiers of the heaven-punishing army fell silent. No one had expected the result to be like this. In their minds, Tian Shu was the #1 prodigy in the universe, the famous god of war. Other than the emperor and the empress, no one could defeat Tian Shu. However, reality shattered everyone's fantasies and expectations. After exchanging 2 blows with the red-haired woman, Tian Shu was sent flying and spitting out blood. What kind of terrifying power was that? Suddenly, the soldiers of the heaven-punishing army felt their hearts in their mouths. Everyone muttered in their hearts. Ji Tianqing's accomplice was also so powerful that even Tian Shu was no match for her. Moreover, the woman with the dual swords was almost as powerful as the woman with the spear. Didn't this mean that the woman with the dual swords could also defeat Tian Shu easily? Oh my God! Both women were so powerful. How could Tian Shu withstand their attacks? If the Empress didn't make a move, Tian Shu would definitely be defeated. Tian Shu also saw the reactions of the soldiers of the heaven-punishing army. He was furious and his murderous intent soared. He was unwilling to admit defeat. He waved the Neptune's halberd again and charged toward Ji Ku. He was so fast that he left a series of afterimages in the sky. When he waved the Neptune's halberd with both hands and unleashed an overwhelming amount of purple light, Ji Ku stared at him with sharp eyes. She found his real body in the sky full of light and shadows. She found his only flaw and thrust her spear with all her strength. Bang! Another deafening explosion erupted, and the purple light that filled the sky shattered with a bang. Before Tian Shu could get close to Ji Ku, he was sent flying again. His hair was disheveled, and he crashed into a palace. The palace collapsed on the spot. It was smashed into pieces and turned into ruins. A large bloody hole appeared in Tian Shu's abdomen. Dark purple blood gushed out of it. Seeing this, the soldiers of the heaven-punishing army on the square were all dumbfounded. They all exclaimed in disbelief. Tian Shu was even more furious. He ignored his injuries and waved the Neptune's halberd again toward Ji Ku. This time, he did not hesitate to use his trump card and unleash his combat strength to the limit. The sea god's halberd swung through the air and a sky-blotting icy blue wave crashed down upon Ji Ku's head with devastating power. Ji Ku was still fearless. He gripped the source stone divine spear tightly with both hands and unleashed 360 spear shadows with all his might. Each spear shadow was over 1,000 zhang long, like a lofty mountain. Moreover, the colors of the spear shadows were dazzling. They were formed from divine flames of different attributes. Golden, crimson, black, purple, and white divine flames exuded terrifying divine might. Boom 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 boom. In the next moment, the 360 spear shadows collided with the monstrous waves, causing an earth-shaking explosion. Under the horrified gazes of the crowd, the overwhelming ice-blue waves were torn apart by the spear shadows. Then, the icy blue waves evaporated completely, turning into water vapor and dissipating. Tian Shu's ultimate killer move was thus dispelled by Ji Ku. Of the 360 spear shadows, only 300 were destroyed. The remaining 30 or so spear shadows pierced the sky pivot in an incomparably violent manner. Bang! 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 Ah! 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 With a series of screams, Tian Shu was sent flying again, rolling 30 miles away. Along the way, he penetrated more than a dozen palaces and plowed a huge gully in the ground. When he fell into the ruins and was buried by countless bricks and tiles, the palaces also collapsed. The scene in front of them caused the heaven-punishing soldiers around the square to reveal expressions of shock and horror. Similar thoughts appeared in everyone's mind. Oh my God! How terrifying is this woman's strength! The emperor is no match for her at all and has been crushed from the beginning to the end. This is too terrifying. I'm afraid that only the empress can defeat this woman. Under the horrified gazes of the crowd, Ji Ku turned into a red stream of light and flew into the depths of the imperial god palace, continuing to pursue Tian Shu. At the same time, Yin Yao did not stop casting. She was using her ultimate sword technique to kill the soldiers around the square. In the span of 10 breaths, she had already killed more than 2,000 people. When she swung her sword at the crowd again, many soldiers of the imperial god palace cried out in alarm and turned to flee in panic. At this moment, another murderous roar exploded from the depths of the imperial god palace. Lowly insects, you must be tired of living. As the cold female voice sounded, a graceful figure flew out from the depths of the imperial god palace and came to the sky. She was wearing a luxurious ice blue dress, which was 30 feet long and fluttering in the sky, making her look like a fairy who had descended from the 9 heavens. She was 7 feet tall, with a delicate face and a graceful and luxurious aura. She really looked like a mother of the world. Moreover, she was the most powerful person in the imperial god palace. Even though she was empty-handed, she still exuded an invisible divine aura that suppressed the entire imperial god palace. The soldiers of the imperial god palace who were running away in a hurry suddenly found their backbone and stopped running. Everyone gathered together, looking at Yun Yao and Ji Ku with vigilance. They were secretly on guard. Tian Shu, who was severely injured, also crawled out of the ruins and flew to the sky, standing behind Yun Shuiyan. His body was covered in purple blood, and there were huge bloody holes in his chest and limbs. His bones could be seen clearly. However, he used his divine powers and secret arts. His body flashed with an ice-blue light, and his wounds healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, he could not recover the divine power he had used so quickly, and his mental state was still not good. Tian Shu stared at Ji Ku and Yun Yao with bloodshot eyes and said to Yun Shuiyan, "Mother, I've already investigated. These 2 lowly servants are Ji Tianqing's accomplices. Moreover, they are Ji Tianqing's wives." As he spoke, Tian Shu's eyes flashed with a cold, bloodthirsty glint. Yun Shuiyan nodded slightly to show that she understood. She said through voice transmission, "Tian Shu, suppress your injuries as soon as possible. Mother will stop them." Tian Shu nodded and acknowledged the order. He was not in a hurry and felt that victory was within his grasp. He believed that the godly king's clone would soon kill Ji Tianqing. It would be best if he and Yun Shuiyan could defeat Ji Tianqing's accomplices. Even if they could not defeat them, they just needed to stall for time. When the godly king's clone arrived, everything would be over. When that happened, the imperial god palace would still be the final winner. At that moment, Yun Shuiyan stared coldly at Yun Yao and Ji Ku. She said in a deep voice, "The 2 of you are quite strong. You don't look like fools, yet you did such a foolish thing. Our clan's backer, the almighty godly king, has already sent a clone to kill Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing is dead for sure, yet you still dare to barge into the imperial god palace. Do you want to die with him?" Yun Shuiyan's thoughts were much more complicated than Tian Shu's. She knew that Yun Yao and Ji Ku were very strong, so she was not in a hurry to kill them. Instead, she used a psychological attack. As expected, Yun Yao and Ji Ku's expressions changed when they heard this. Their brows furrowed tightly. Chapter 2744. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and company had come to rescue Ji Tianqing. They had not clearly seen what had happened in the void and the descent of the godly monarch's avatar. Now, their hearts were in their mouths when they heard Yun Shuiyan's words. As the saying went, concern led to confusion. The Heaven Punisher race's backer is indeed an upper realm godly monarch. When the Heaven Punisher planet was facing destruction, the godly monarch actually took action. Even if it's just a godly monarch's avatar, it has the strength of a divine lord. Brother Tianqing is definitely not his match. Yun Yao and Ji Ke looked at each other and secretly communicated with their consciousness. A few years ago, Yun Yao had a premonition of the Heaven Punisher planet's destruction. She saw the future in the illusion and witnessed the intervention of the upper realm's godly monarch, resulting in Ji Tianqing's tragic death and heavy casualties. Now, Ji Tianqing had been missing for more than half a month, and he could not be contacted. Therefore, Yun Yao did not doubt Yun Shuyan's words. She was only anxious about how to rescue Ji Tianqing. Yun Shuyan had been staring at Yun Yao and Ji Ke's expressions. When she saw their expressions change slightly, she could not help but sneer inwardly. She continued, "If I'm not wrong, you want to save Ji Tianqing. Unfortunately, you've come to the wrong place. Ji Tianqing is not in the Arch Palace. The two of us do not have the strength to defeat him, nor can we detain him here." What she said was the truth. Yun Yao and Ji Ke also believed her. Yun Shuyan was even more certain when she saw them remain silent. She continued, "With your intelligence, you should know that fighting with us here is just a waste of time. Take your people and leave. Head to the east of the Heaven Punisher planet. Ji Tianqing is being pursued by the godly monarch's avatar and has long fled to that continent. If you rush there in time, you might be able to collect his corpse." He. Yun Shuyan's expression was indifferent as she sneered expressionlessly. She was a woman, so of course, she understood women's thoughts. What she had just said struck a chord with Yun Yao and Ji Ke. The two women were a little hesitant as they discussed secretly through voice transmission. There were two things before them. One was to destroy the Arch Palace and kill Yun Shuyan and her son. Two was to help Ji Tianqing, the godly monarch's avatar. In comparison, Ji Tianqing's safety was not the monarch palace. The two ladies exchanged a few words and prepared to leave the imperial god palace. After all, Yun Yao had already used a secret technique to check. Ji Tianqing was indeed not here. But at this moment, Tian Shu, who had just finished treating his injuries, suddenly changed his expression. He glared murderously at Ji Ke and bellowed in a deep voice, "You bitch! How dare you try to run away after wounding me? Wishful thinking." Tian Shu roared and used the power of the spatial laws. He waved the sea god halberd and shot out hundreds of light blades. Each light blade contained the power of space that could tear the world apart. Hundreds of light blades appeared at the same time and immediately enveloped Ji Ke's body. However, Ji Ke was fearless. She relied on the powerful defense of the Source Stone armor and did not retreat at all. She held the Source Stone divine spear with both hands and used a secret divine power. Sky-killing divine flame. Following her cold shout, her entire body burst forth with a violent aura that could destroy heaven and earth. The Source Stone divine spear also released 5-colored divine fire and formed a 100-mile divine flame spear that smashed towards Tian Shu's head. Swish! The 100-mile-long flaming divine spear burned the sky to smithereens, revealing a vast expanse of pitch-black void. Under the endless divine flame, tens of thousands of miles were turned into a sea of fire. The temperature was terrifyingly high. Boom! Boom! With a series of earth-shattering explosions, Tian Shu's spacetime light blades were all shattered by the divine flame spear. The violent divine flame spear shadow smashed towards Tian Shu and was about to kill him. At the critical moment, Yun Shuyan's expression changed and she waved her hand without hesitation. Sky-sealing palm. She suddenly raised her palms and struck out 2 giant icy blue palms that blotted out the sky and grabbed at the divine flame spear shadow. Since Yun Shuyan had attacked, Yun Yao would not sit back and watch. She immediately waved her 2 swords and attacked. The power of heaven and earth, the glory of the sun and moon. Yin and yang, the 5 elements, the cycle of heaven and earth. Great Qianquan sword. She shouted and waved her swords with both hands, releasing the most powerful divine power. A five-colored greatsword spanning 100 miles across the sky suddenly descended from the heavens, slashing straight at Yun Shuiyan and Dubhe. Chapter 27:45. Boom! Kaboom! Kaboom! A series of earth-shattering explosions were heard in the Arch Palace. The sky-sundering spear shadow that was 100 miles long was shattered by the giant icy blue palms. But then, the giant icy blue palms were shattered into pieces by the Grand Qiankuan sword. Yun Yao and Ji Ke worked together to neutralize Yun Shuiyan's attack. The destructive shockwave sent the two of them and Yun Shuiyan flying. Tian Shu was injured again. His organs were shattered and blood gushed out of his mouth and nose. He retreated 100 miles away. Yun Shuiyan wasn't injured, but she looked at Yun Yao in shock. Her eyes were flashing coldly. She only knew that Ji Ke was powerful and had reached the half-step heavenly god realm. She had also mastered 5 rare divine flames and was qualified to fight with her. She never thought that Yun Yao, who looked gentle like water and beautiful like a fairy, would actually have such a powerful strength. Not only that, but she also sensed a kind of ancient, vicissitude divine might from Yun Yao's divine power. It made her heart palpitate and she felt a little scared. There was no doubt that the two women in black armor in front of her were peerless overlords who could exchange thousands of blows with her. Yun Shuiyan felt even more depressed. She could only blame Tian Shu for asking for trouble. But the battle had already begun. How could she retreat? Otherwise, she would disappoint the tens of thousands of soldiers in the Arch Palace and lose their morale. "You're indeed quite capable," Yun Shuiyan yelled. She didn't have time to check on Tian Shu's injuries. She waved her palms again and used her ultimate divine power. 8 Baron Nirvana Palm. Yun Shuiyan's palms flashed with dazzling golden divine light and unleashed a mysterious and vast power. Suddenly, 24 giant palms appeared in the sky and slashed at Ji Ke and Yun Yao like axes. The two women already knew that Yun Shuiyan had an extraordinary background and was even stronger than Great Emperor Tian Fa. They didn't dare to let their guard down. They waved their swords and spears and faced the attack seriously. Tian Shu also used a secret technique to deal with the internal injuries before charging over again. This time, not only did he wield the Neptune's halberd to attack Ji Ke, but he also summoned 9 dazzling divine swords to attack Ji Ke from all directions. The 9 swords were supreme-grade true god weapons forged by Great Emperor Tian Fa and Yun Shuiyan. They were specially made to complement his 7-star brilliant sun divine body. Tian Shu controlled the sword with his mind and performed a marvelous sword technique. The 9 divine swords danced back and forth like shooting stars streaking across the sky, their power boundless. Boom! Boom boom! Bang 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 bang! The 4 peerless powerhouses fought fiercely in the sky. They used all their strength and used their most powerful skills. The colorful divine light and the sword light collided fiercely in the sky, creating a deafening boom. The destructive shockwave spread out in all directions with billions of shards of divine light, engulfing the entire Emperor God Palace. The soldiers around were too weak and they weren't even qualified to watch the battle. When the shockwave of the battle spread, everyone ran away in a hurry. However, most of them weren't spared. They were swept away by the shockwave of the battle and turned into ashes. The Emperor God Palace, which was a few hundred miles wide, was also covered by the shockwave. Countless palaces and houses collapsed and turned into ruins. The battle between the 4 peerless overlords was a disaster for the Emperor God Palace. 15 minutes later. The battle between the 4 overlords paused for a moment. Tian Shu was severely injured again. His body was covered in purple blood and holes. It was a tragic sight. Yun Shuiyan's hair was messy and her face was pale. She was breathing heavily. Of course, she was only a little bit flustered. She wasn't really hurt. Ji Ku and Yunyao were protected by the energy stone armors, so they were safe. However, they had used too much of their divine power, so they had to end the battle quickly. If the battle dragged on, their divine power wasn't as strong as Yun Shuyan's and they would definitely lose. Fortunately, the huge Emperor God Palace had been destroyed. Hundreds of palaces and houses had been turned into ruins. Only a few hundred miles of broken walls and rubble were left in the white sea of clouds. There had been more than 100 priests, more than 20,000 guards, and more than 100,000 soldiers in the palace. But now, all the guards and priests had been killed. More than 100,000 soldiers had also been killed by Bai Long, Ji Wuhan, Ji Wushuang, and the 4 divine beasts. There were only about 2,000 survivors. They had long fled the Emperor God Palace when they saw the situation wasn't good. Bai Long, Ji Wushuang, and the others didn't waste time chasing after them. After completing their respective tasks, they gathered above the ruins and joined the battle. At first, Yun Shuiyan was protecting Tian Shu. She had the upper hand against Yun Yao and Ji Ku. But as Bai Long, Ji Wushuang, Ji Wuhan, and the 4 divine beasts joined the battle, the situation of the mother and son changed immediately. The 2 of them were besieged. They were in a dangerous situation where they could be seriously injured or even killed at any time. No matter how powerful Yun Shuiyan was, she couldn't withstand the combined attack of 5 peak true gods and 4 divine beasts. As for Tian Shu, there was no need to even mention him. The battle had only gone on for 100 seconds, but dozens of wounds had already appeared on his body. His entire left leg had been cut off. If the battle continued for another 15 minutes, he would be cut into pieces and blasted into pieces. It didn't matter how strong his physique was or how freakish his recovery ability was. Yun Shuiyan couldn't even take care of herself. It was very difficult for her to protect him. It was only then that Tian Shu woke up from his dream. He finally understood why Yun Shuiyan had let Yun Yao and Ji Ku go. Only then did he realize what a stupid thing he had done. He was courting death. In the sky above a continent east of planet Heaven Trader. The battle between Ji Tianqing and the Divine King's clone was still ongoing. Both sides had been chasing and fighting for half a day. Ji Tianqing fought as he fled. He had finally escaped a few 100 million miles and arrived at the easternmost continent of planet Heaven Trader. Unfortunately, he was entangled by the Divine King's clone and had no chance of escaping. In the process of fighting and escaping, he had suffered countless injuries. Perhaps it was 3,000 times. Or 8,000 times. He couldn't remember clearly. He only knew that every part of his body had been shattered by the Divine King's clone. Even his head was no exception. However, he had used the life-saving light of the heaven-mending pearl every time to quickly heal his injuries. That was how he had survived until now. His divine power had been severely depleted, and his strength had long weakened by 40%. Things had come to this point. Ji Tianqing knew that no matter how weak the Divine King's clone was, he still had the strength of a divine lord. No matter how monstrous he was, he only had the combat strength of a 5th-level celestial god. The 2 were not on the same level at all. Even if they fought for a few more days and nights, the outcome would not change at all. He would definitely lose. He could only think of a way to escape. As long as he could escape planet Heaven Trader, he could shake off the Divine King's clone. Thinking of this, he could only take a palm strike from the Divine King's clone and retreat 150 miles. He decisively summoned the Heavenly Star Shuttle. I hope the heavens will open their eyes and stop joking with me. Ji Tianqing muttered in his heart. Without hesitation, he circulated his divine power and injected it into the Heavenly Star Shuttle. Chapter 2746. Swoosh. Divine power surged into the Heavenly Star Shuttle, causing it to emit a dazzling white light. A powerful spatial ripple spread out in all directions. Ji Tianqing could clearly sense that the mysterious power released by the heavenly star shuttle had formed a connection with a certain star in the void. That star was very far away from the Heaven Punisher planet. It was at least a few 100 million miles away. Ji Tianqing was overjoyed. He saw hope in escaping. However, before the heavenly star shuttle could take him away from the Heaven Punisher planet, the godly king's clone sneered. Ha ha ha. You used this heavenly god artifact to escape from the void back to the Heaven Punisher planet? The godly king's clone's eyes were sharp. He immediately saw through the heavenly star shuttle's grade and effect. Of course, he did not care about a divine artifact of this grade. If I let you escape, I won't be able to wash away this humiliation even if I kill myself. The godly king's clone sneered. He suddenly unleashed his most violent divine power and used his ultimate divine ability. Freeze! Explode! He shouted coldly. He suddenly raised his palms as if he was going to embrace the sky. An invisible, overwhelming aura immediately loomed over the area within 50,000 li. At the same time, the endless white light from the heavenly star shuttle swallowed Ji Tianqing's body. He was about to disappear from the sky. However, the heaven and earth and space within 50,000 miles instantly froze. It was as if this area was frozen. Even the flow of time slowed down by 100 times. In other words, the speed at which the heavenly star shuttle carried Ji Tianqing away from the Heaven Punisher planet was slowed down by 100 times. From an instant, it became 5 breaths time. For the godly king's clone, 5 breaths time was enough for him to do many things. Damn it! He can control time. Ji Tianqing's heart was filled with shock. His eyes suddenly widened as he exclaimed in his heart. Time was one of the most mysterious powers in the world. Even a godly king might not be able to control it. Among the 3,000 great Daos, the mysteries and power of time were second only to destiny. Even the god of swords back then had only taken half a step and barely grasped time acceleration. What was more difficult than time acceleration was time stopping, and the most difficult was time deceleration. As for time reversal, that was a supreme power that even the most elite god kings were unable to grasp. Just as Ji Tianqing was filled with shock, the god king's avatar slowly brought his palms together. The heaven and earth and space within a radius of 50,000 kilometers also collapsed. It exploded in an instant. Boom! Within 50,000 miles, the sky collapsed, the earth shattered, and the space collapsed and folded. This region was directly destroyed by the God King's avatar, turning into a pitch-black void. The mountains, rivers, sky, earth, and spiritual energy all disappeared without a trace. Boom! The heavenly star shuttle disintegrated into billions of pieces that scattered in the void like quicksand. The dazzling white light that enveloped Ji Tianqing also became fragmented. Then, something even more terrifying happened. Ji Tianqing's 1,000-meter-tall body also cracked like a piece of ice. Kacha-kacha, a crisp shattering sound was heard. He saw with his own eyes that his god body was gradually shattered as the cracks extended. After 5 breaths of time, the God King's avatar's divine power dissipated. This void started to gradually heal, repaired by heavenly Tao laws. But Ji Tianqing had already become minced meat all over the ground, as many as 500 pieces. Golden divine blood seeped out of the fragments, scattering into the sky. If it were other true gods, being smashed into pieces all over the ground, they would have long breathed their last. But Ji Tianqing did not die. His divine soul still existed. Under the protection of the heaven-mending pearl, he still maintained consciousness. He was unresigned and actually used his mind to control those 500 over pieces of minced meat, slowly gathering them together, still wanting to reconstruct his body. This scene was incomparably strange. The God King's avatar was not surprised either. He looked at those minced meat pieces with a smile and said in an icy tone, Ji Tianqing, this emperor actually remembered your name. This is your honor. However, in front of absolute powerful strength, no matter how monstrous you are, there's only a path to death. You've used up all of your means, right? Before you die, this emperor will ask you one last question. Ji Tianqing did not answer and was still working hard to piece his body together. Even if his physical body was destroyed, he never despaired or gave up. He suddenly thought of a question. Previously, the God King's avatar fought with him for so long and did not use all of his strength. It had a feeling of a cat playing with a mouse. It seemed like the God King's avatar wanted to see just how many trump cards he had. And just now, when the God King's avatar executed the space-freezing explosion divine ability, he clearly used all of his strength. After destroying his physical body, the God King's avatar was not in a hurry to kill him. Instead, he wanted to ask him a question. Could it be that the God King's avatar was stalling for time? No. Ji Tianqing used his divine sense to observe and discovered that the God King's avatar's golden light had clearly become much fainter. This meant that the God King's avatar's power consumption was too great, and his strength was starting to weaken. Ji Tianqing immediately thought, that's right. This God King's avatar only has 1% of the main body's strength. When he moves in the mortal world, not only will he be suppressed by heavenly Tao, his divine power can't be replenished either. He can't stay here for a long time. Once his divine power is exhausted, he will dissipate. As long as I don't die and continue to waste time with him, I will have a chance to escape. Thinking of this, hope rose in Ji Tianqing's heart. At this time, the God King's avatar put away his sneer and said in an icy tone, Ji Tianqing, I have seen through your disguise. You are not a true dragon human. You have only mastered the divine abilities of the dragon race. You are so monstrous, and you are proficient in many divine abilities and secret techniques that only the upper realm has. You are definitely not an ant of the mortal world. Which expert are you the reincarnation of? The God King's avatar had his hands behind his back. His 3 eyes were shining brightly as he stared at Ji Tianqing, waiting for his answer. However, Ji Tianqing remained silent. Only more than 500 pieces of minced meat were slowly pieced together, making a slight rustling sound. The God King's avatar was confident of victory and did not stop him. He waited patiently. After about 10 breaths of time, more than 500 pieces of minced meat were pieced together, forming a giant of golden light that was 10,000 feet tall and covered in cracks. Ji Tianqing hurriedly absorbed the life-saving divine light from the heaven-mending pearl and enveloped himself. Swoosh! The dense white light flowed slowly and only dissipated after a few breaths of time. Ji Tianqing's shattered body was completely healed, and not a single crack could be seen on his body. He stared coldly at the God King's avatar and said in a deep voice, I don't understand what you are saying. Ha ha ha. You are stubborn. The God King's avatar sneered disdainfully and said in a sinister tone, but you should understand that as long as I want to know, no one can hide it. You no longer have any chance. I will capture your divine soul and strip your divine soul of its memories. At that time, all the answers will be revealed. As he said that, the God King's avatar raised his palms again and unleashed his strongest power, using an ultimate divine ability. Destroy. Chapter 2747. The Divine King clone shouted coldly. Just one word exploded in the sky like thunder. In the next instant, the surrounding sky that had just healed directly turned into a void. A surge of dark supreme divine power enveloped a radius of tens of thousands of miles. Under the terrifying divine power, Ji Tianqing did not have the chance to dodge at all and was directly suppressed. Swoosh! His 10,000 feet tall body was actually like a weathered rock, mottled with age. Immediately after, his body collapsed with a bang, turning into a billion grains of sand and dust, scattering in the darkness. The divine body that he had just condensed and repaired actually directly weathered away, turning into countless dust. Not even a piece of complete flesh and bone, not a drop of golden divine blood was left. What kind of terrifying method was this? However, after the divine king clone executed this divine ability, the golden light all over his body dissipated by more than half, his body became even thinner. His strength also weakened rapidly, only having 60% of his strength left. Swoosh! A large cloud of sand and dust scattered in the darkness and disappeared very quickly. In the darkness, only a walnut-sized light bead was left, releasing a dense divine light. Just as the divine king clone said, he destroyed Ji Tianqing's physical body, leaving only the divine soul behind. But Ji Tianqing's divine soul had long fused together with the heaven-mending bead. The divine king clone was just about to execute a capturing technique to capture Ji Tianqing's divine soul. Suddenly seeing that dense white bead clearly, his body immediately trembled, both eyes revealing a look of surprise. This divine bead is actually a divine king-level treasure. No wonder. No wonder this boy has such heaven-defying talent and even grasped so many top-notch divine abilities. Obtaining a king-level divine artifact in the mortal world, what kind of heaven-defying lucky chance is this? The divine king clone sensed the aura of a king-level divine artifact from the heaven-mending bead and immediately came to a realization. He immediately fired out a giant palm of golden light, grabbing towards the heaven-mending bead. However, the heaven-mending bead emitted a dazzling white light, turning into 3 sword blades, slashing towards the divine king clone. Clearly, Ji Tianqing's divine soul was still there, not dead, nor unconscious. He manipulated the heaven-mending bead with his divine soul, releasing a vast divine power to deal with the divine king clone. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. The blazing white sword pierced through the air, aiming straight for the divine king's clone's vital point. However, the divine king's clone remained fearless as he sneered. Ha ha ha. It's just a king-grade divine artifact that has exhausted all of its power. What can it do to me? That was right. The heaven-mending pearl was once a king-grade divine artifact, but its power had long been exhausted. After Ji Tianqing had obtained it, he had helped it absorb all kinds of energy over the years, which allowed it to regain its luster. However, its power was still less than 10% of a king-grade god artifacts. At the same time as he sneered, the divine king's avatar brazenly waved both of his palms, exploding with extreme power as he ruthlessly hacked at the heaven-mending pearl. Heaven shattering. His huge palms emitted a dazzling red light, as if they were giant axes that could split the heavens. They instantly shattered the 3 blazing white sword blades. Immediately after, the crimson palms, which were as large as mountains, fiercely struck the heaven-mending pearl. Boom! Following a muffled explosion, the heaven-mending bead shone with a brilliant white light and was sent flying thousands of miles away. After the white light that soared into the sky was extinguished, the heaven-mending orb became dim. It was obvious that it had been severely injured. Although it did not shatter on the spot, there were no cracks. However, more than half of its power had been used up, and it became dim again. Ji Tianqing's soul, which was inside the heaven-mending orb, also suffered an unprecedented injury and fell into a coma. This emperor wants to see what this divine orb is. The divine king's avatar's figure became even fainter, and his power became even weaker. However, he was still able to kill Ji Tianqing several times. His figure flashed across thousands of miles of darkness and appeared in front of the heaven-mending orb. Just as he was about to reach out and grab the heaven-mending orb, an unbelievable scene appeared. Swoosh! The heaven-mending orb emitted a dazzling white light, and it instantly disappeared into the darkness. The divine king's avatar's huge palm grabbed empty air, and he unwillingly withdrew it. Damn it! In the end, he still escaped. As expected of a king-grade divine artifact, it actually has a consciousness to protect its owner. The divine king's avatar was filled with anger, and he gritted his teeth hatefully. He used his divine perception to search a radius of 60 million miles, but he did not find Ji Tianqing and the heaven-mending orb. Only then did he turn around and leave. After all, the heaven-mending orb had disappeared into thin air. It had already left planet Heaven Trader, and its whereabouts were unknown. The divine king's avatar did not know where to look for it. He lowered his head and glanced at his dimming golden body, which was getting thinner and thinner. He hurriedly flew in the direction of the Arch Palace. This emperor doesn't have much time left. I have to deal with all the future troubles. He muttered in a low voice, and with a single step, he crossed thousands of miles and headed straight for the endless sea realm. At the same time, in the Sea of Clouds where the Arch Palace was located, the battle was still ongoing. The once magnificent Arch Palace had long been reduced to hundreds of miles of ruins. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers and experts had also been killed by Yun Yao and the others. At this moment, only Yun Shuiyan, her son, and Yun Yao were high up in the sky. 5 true god experts and 4 divine beasts were attacking Yun Shuiyan and her son with all their might, and they had completely gained the upper hand. The two sides had already exchanged tens of thousands of blows. The world-destroying battle caused hundreds of thousands of miles of land to sink and the sky to collapse. Yun Yao and the others were not injured. Only the 4 divine beasts, Ji Wuhan and Ji Wushuang, had suffered minor injuries. Tian Shu had long been severely injured and was on the verge of death. His limbs had been cut off, and he looked like a stick covered in purple blood. His divine soul was also severely injured, and he was in a daze, dizzy and blurry state. If Yun Shuiyan had not been protecting him, he would have been hacked to death and torn to pieces. Yun Shuiyan's strength had already reached 30 times that of a peak true god. However, she had been besieged for so long, and she had to divert her attention to protect Tian Shu. She had long been severely injured. She was no longer as graceful and elegant as before. Her long hair was messy, and her clothes were ragged. Her entire body was covered in icy blue blood and wounds. Dozens of wounds were so deep that her bones could be seen. She had also used up more than half of her divine power, and her combat strength was constantly weakening. She had no choice but to take the severely injured Tian Shu with her and flee into the distance while fighting. She was anxious, angry, and humiliated. She was the reincarnation of a divine lord, an expert who wanted to break through to the divine king realm. When had she fallen to such a miserable state? However, the current situation left her in despair. She could not see a chance to escape. She could only pray in her heart that the divine king's clone would quickly finish off Ji Tianqing and return to save her and her son. Perhaps her prayers were finally effective. Just as her injuries were worsening and her strength was weakening, a golden light lit up in the distant sky. The sacred golden light was filled with supreme divine power, illuminating the world. Yun Shuiyan thought she was seeing things or was hallucinating. However, in the next moment, a golden figure that was thousands of miles tall appeared high in the sky. Swoosh! The figure that was thousands of miles tall had 3 eyes and 6 divine wings. Its entire body exuded a divine power that could subdue the world. I'm not seeing things. The divine king has indeed returned. There's finally hope for us. When Yun Shuiyan saw the figure clearly, she was so excited that her blood surged. She revealed an expression of relief. Chapter 27:48. Of course, Tian Shu also saw the godly king's clone. Unfortunately, his injuries were too severe, and he was like a pile of mush. No matter how surprised he was, he could not shout. Yun Shuiyan and her son also noticed the godly king's clone. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others also saw the godly king's clone. Everyone and the 4 godly beasts were stunned for a moment. Then, they looked extremely worried and anxious. Is that the backer of the Heaven Punisher, the godly king from the upper realm? Although it's just a godly king's clone, his divine power is so powerful. There was no news of Big Brother Tianqing before. He must have been hunted down by the godly king's clone. Now that the godly king's clone has appeared, doesn't that mean Big Brother Tianqing? Impossible. Master is invincible. He won't die. Everyone thought of the most important problem, and their expressions changed. The worry and anxiety in their hearts were about to explode. At this moment, the godly king's clone looked down at Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the 4 godly beasts. 2 half-step heavenly gods and 3 peak true gods. And a black dragon, a heavenly fox, a glazed fire dragon. That big fish, could it be a Kuan? The godly king's clone was very sharp. He instantly saw through everyone's strength and the identities of the 4 godly beasts. Even though he was extremely powerful and could control thousands of gods, he could not help but twitch his mouth. His eyes were filled with shock. There are actually so many powerhouses and such rare divine beasts in this ant-like mortal world. Moreover, those ants and the 4 godly beasts are Ji Tianqing's accomplices. The godly king's clone was also shocked. Yun Yao and Ji Ku were half-step heavenly gods, while Bai Long, Ji Wuhan, and Ji Wushuang were peak true gods. There were definitely a bunch of them in the godly realm. To the godly king, they were all ants. He did not even have the interest to look at them. But don't forget, this is the mortal world. This godly king had spent many years and used many special methods to cultivate the Heaven Punisher Great Emperor and Tian Shu. A half-step heavenly god and a peak true god. Now, there were 2 half-step heavenly gods and 3 peak true gods among Ji Tianqing's accomplices. Most importantly, among the 3 peak true gods, there were 2 children. One was incomparably handsome, while the other was as delicate as carved jade. Both of them looked no more than 10 years old. This was too terrifying. Even in the god realm, geniuses with such extraordinary aptitudes could be counted on one's fingers. There were also the 4 godly beasts. Black dragons and glazed fire dragons were very common in the dragon world, so there was no need to mention them. Of course, the godly beasts was godly king was godly god course. As for that fat-head blue fish that looked a little silly, its origins were even more terrifying. The godly was godly was godlies was godly king god. Godly godly yes godly god. The godly king's clone stared at the godly king fervently. He suddenly wanted to raise a pet as a mount. He had even thought of a name. Big Fish. When Big Fish reached adulthood, he could ride it and roam the godly realm. That way, he would be able to intimidate billions of godly tribes. To put it bluntly, that would be even cooler. I want that godly king god. The godly king's clone narrowed his eyes as a greedy sneer appeared on his face. Then, he looked at Yun Yao, Ji Ku, the white dragon, and the others. Although Yun Yao and Ji Ku were very beautiful, they were as pure as ice and as pure as jade and as elegant as fairies. Unfortunately, the honorable godly king had seen tens of thousands of beautiful goddesses, saintesses, and top socialites. Moreover, he was not a human. In terms of aesthetics, he had a completely different concept from humans. Therefore, he was not interested in Yun Yao and Ji Ku's beauty. His gaze stopped on everyone's armor. The armor that was as black as ink looked ordinary. However, the godly king's clone could sense that the armor and weapons in their hands contained an invisible divine power. The divine power aura made him curious and eager. The material of the armor and weapons should be the boundless divine stone that Haotian mentioned, right? How interesting. I have to study it carefully. With that, the godly king's clone's target was set. He would spare the godly king god's life and bring it back to the godly realm. He would kill the others and the 3 divine beasts, take their weapons and armor, and bring them back for study. It was a perfect outcome. Therefore, the godly king's clone glanced at Yun Shuiyan, who was covered in blood, and said indifferently, "Yun Shuiyan, you may leave." "Yes, your majesty." Yun Shuiyan was overjoyed. She quickly bowed and left with the unconscious Tianshu. The godly king's clone was going to take action personally. Then, all of this would end soon. Moreover, in the past few hundred years, she had only reported her name once when she participated in the grand sacrificial ceremony. The godly king remembered it. What did this mean? The godly king still paid attention to her. In fact, his attention and expectations for her were higher than those for the great emperor Haotian. Yun Shuiyan thought to herself, "Don't talk about the fact that the great emperor Haotian isn't extinct yet. Even if we are, I, Yun Shuiyan, will have the support of a supreme godly king when I ascend to the upper realm. My future path to godhood will be smooth sailing." At that moment, the godly king's clone looked at Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others. He said indifferently, "Other than that Kuan, the rest of you can commit suicide." His tone was very casual, as if he was talking about a trivial matter. There was no false bravado, nor was there any pretense of authority. This was because there was no need for a paragon like him, who stood at the peak of the heavenly realm. However, even ants had lives, and they had the right to struggle for survival. Moreover, the ants in the sky were the most powerful ones among the trillions of ants. In our dictionary, there is only death in battle. There is no such thing as suicide. Yun Yao looked coldly at the godly king's clone as she spoke in a sonorous voice. "Bastard! Where is my big brother Tianqing? What did you do to him?" Ji Ku's eyes were filled with murderous intent. He held the origin stone divine spear and stared at the godly king's clone. Bai Long licked his lips as his white hair danced in the wind. He sneered with a bloodthirsty expression. "You are just a mere godly king's clone. How dare you be so arrogant? You have descended to the mortal realm and gone through so many battles. How much strength do you have left? I would like to see how much strength you have compared to your main body." The youngest Ji Wuhan and Ji Wushuang were also filled with grief and anger. They stared at the godly king's clone with bloodshot eyes. "Bastard! Give us back our father." Everyone's willpower was firm, and their resistance was resolute. Moreover, they did not fear the godly king's clone at all. This surprised the godly king's clone. He thought to himself, "These ants seem to have known that I would send my clone." However, he thought about it from another perspective. This was not important. After all, it did not matter if those ants resisted or not. Chapter 2749. Of course. The strong often had some wicked interests that ordinary people didn't have. For example, when he was chasing after Ji Tianqing, he didn't immediately use a big move to kill Ji Tianqing. Instead, he acted like a cat toying with a mouse, forcing Ji Tianqing into a desperate situation and forcing him to use all his trump cards. During this process, the divine king clone discovered many of Ji Tianqing's secrets. At the same time, he also enjoyed making Ji Tianqing die in the most desperate and helpless situation. It seemed like Ji Tianqing had only disappeared and wasn't completely dead. When he thought of this, the divine king clone was somewhat unwilling. He felt a little uneasy and felt that there might be variables in the future. Therefore, another idea popped up in his mind. In order to make up for the unwillingness in his heart and also to prevent future variables, his gaze fell on Ji Wuhan and Ji Wushuang. Just now, these two brats seem to have said that Ji Tianqing is their father. Ha ha ha. Interesting. The divine king clone stared deeply at Ji Tianqing and muttered to himself, as expected, he is 80% similar to Ji Tianqing. He is so serious and cold at such a young age. Even his aptitude and talent are so outstanding. It would be too much of a pity to kill such a perfect unpolished gem. Why don't I bring him and Tian Shu back together and train them? They will definitely become this emperor's sharp blades in the future. Ha! Even if there are variables in the future and Ji Tianqing can go to the God realm to seek revenge. Just think about how the father and son would have to fight each other to the death when they meet. Just how pleasing would that be? When he thought of this, the Divine King clone's sneer became even more sinister. After making up his mind, he didn't waste any more words and raised his palms to attack. However, he didn't expect that Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others were even faster and actually took the initiative to attack. Great Qinkuan Sword. Raging flames incinerate the heavens. Space-splitting dragon shadow sword. Endless stars sword. In that instant, everyone unleashed their strongest powers, unleashing their strongest killing moves to surround and attack the God King's clone. The gigantic sword that could split the heavens and earth, the five-colored divine flames that surged and covered the sky, the white dragon phantom that traversed the horizon, and the gigantic sword that descended from the sky. There were also 4 divine beasts that attacked with all their might, releasing heaven-burning raging flames, icy light, and divine light shadows. Instantly, the area within a radius of 50,000 kilometers was illuminated by a dazzling divine light. Surging divine power filled the entire area. The entire area was in complete chaos. Hiding thousands of miles away, Yun Shuiyan couldn't be bothered to treat Tianshu's injuries. She hurriedly retreated thousands of miles away. Facing the attacks of the 5 experts and the 4 divine beasts, the God King's clone did not dodge. That would be too embarrassing, and there was no need to do so. The God King's clone frowned when he saw their divine arts and sensed the attributes of their divine power. A look of surprise flashed through his eyes. These ants and divine beasts seemed to have had some fortuitous encounters. Of course, the God King's clone could tell that Yun Yao was no ordinary person. She was like the embodiment of the world. Ji Ku was also extraordinary. He could control the Phoenix race's Nirvana divine flame, and he probably had the ability to become immortal. The other 3 people and 4 divine beasts also had their own special abilities. Of course, they could only surprise the God King's clone. That was all. A bunch of ants. You deserve to die, muttered the God King's clone indifferently. He raised his palms and slammed them down. Boom! Crack! Instantly, 2 gigantic crimson palms that blotted out the sky slammed into the divine light shadows that filled the sky. There was a loud explosion, and the light shadows that filled the sky collapsed and exploded. The white dragon phantom and the gigantic sword that traversed the horizon, the divine light shadows that were as large as mountains, the divine flames that blotted out the sky, they were all shattered by a single palm. In the face of absolute power, no matter how flashy a divine art was, it was useless. With a loud rumble, the divine art attacks of the 4 divine beasts and the divine beasts dissipated along with the 2 gigantic crimson palms. Everyone's attacks were easily neutralized by the God King's clone. However, the God King's clone only used 70% of his strength. He was unable to injure Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others. Such an outcome made Yun Shuiyan, who was thousands of miles away, frown. That's not right. With His Majesty's strength, he should be able to severely injure them in one move. Although Yun Shuiyan knew that the 5 experts and the 4 divine beasts would be able to beat her to a pulp if they joined forces, it would be a tragic sight. However, she stubbornly believed that the God King should be able to crush everything in his path. No matter how strong the opponent was, no matter how many there were, he should be able to crush them all. And the current situation clearly did not match the God King's clone's strength. She frowned and thought for a moment, revealing a look of worry. Could it be that the God King's clone had already expended most of his strength when he was fighting Ji Tianqing? At this moment, the God King's clone is already very weak. With this thought in mind, Yun Shuiyan's heart, which had just relaxed, could not help but tense up again. She had to be on guard. If the God King's clone was defeated, she would have to quickly leave planet Heaven Trader. At the same time, Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others had the same thoughts as Yun Shuiyan. Everyone's tense expressions relaxed a little. White Dragon pointed his sword at the God King's clone and mocked contemptuously, "What bullsh** T God King? Is this all you've got? Just now, you acted like you were the boss of the world, but in the end, you're just an idiot." The God King's clone was enraged. He was the supreme God King who ruled over thousands of gods. When had he ever been scolded by an ant? This was absolutely intolerable. This emperor has underestimated you ants. But do you think that you have the right to fight me? Naive. The God King's clone shouted coldly. He stopped underestimating them and used his full strength. Sky collapsing fist. The God King's clone suddenly extended his left palm and blasted out a golden fist shadow that was as large as a mountain. The fist shadow descended from the sky, carrying with it endless divine might as it enveloped the glazed fire dragon. Before the fist shadow arrived, it was suppressed by the supreme divine might. The space around it froze, making it unable to dodge. Without a doubt, the God King's clone had changed his strategy. He was going to kill everyone one by one. The first target to be killed was the inconspicuous glazed fire dragon. At this critical moment, the glazed fire dragon could only resist with all its might. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others also saw through the God King's clone's intention. They let out a cry of surprise and combined their powers to resist. Suddenly, countless sword shadows lit up and slashed toward the sky collapsing fist shadow. Bam! 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 Following a series of deafening explosions, the divine spells that everyone used were all destroyed. Fragments of divine light burst out and covered the sky. This time, the God King's clone used his strongest power and used a killer move. Its power had indeed increased by 3 times. Bam! There was a loud, muffled explosion. The sky collapsing fist shadow struck the glazed fire dragon. It immediately let out a miserable cry. The mountain-like golden dragon body was smashed into pieces by the sky collapsing fist shadow. Billions of pieces of flesh and blood splattered and scattered between heaven and earth. Not only was the glazed fire dragon's physical body destroyed, but its dragon soul was also instantly killed by the punch. It died on the spot. Chapter 2750. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others had witnessed the glazed fire dragon being killed with a single punch. The shock and anger in their hearts erupted like a volcano. No one had expected the godly king's clone to have such terrifying divine might when he went all out. He's still the divine king's clone after all. Ji Ku was filled with grief and anger as he looked at the glazed fire dragon's body parts scattered all over the place. That short sentence contained too much helplessness and pessimism. The most sorrowful person was Yun Yao. The glazed fire dragon had been with her for countless years, accompanying her in her cultivation. She had long developed feelings for it. But now, the glazed fire dragon had been killed by the divine king's clone right under her nose. Filled with anger, she really wanted to kill the divine king's clone with her sword. But reason calmed her down. Although the divine king's clone has weakened a little, he can still kill us one by one. Even if we attack him as a group and exhaust his divine power, we will all be dead by then. We can't be entangled with him anymore. Let's leave this place first, find Tianqing, and come up with a countermeasure. Yun Yao used her divine consciousness to convey her thoughts to everyone. Ji Ku and the white dragon smiled bitterly and shook their heads. Escape? Can we escape? The divine king's clone is 100 times faster than us. There's no way we can escape. Just as everyone was discussing telepathically, the divine king's clone attacked again. This time, his target was the black dragon. I hate the reptiles of the dragon clan the most. The Divine King's clone had a cold look in his eyes as he shouted coldly. Sky-splitting palm. He stretched out his palms again and unleashed his strongest power, creating two golden palm shadows that were thousands of miles long. The dazzling golden sky-splitting palm shadows struck down with unparalleled divine power, locking onto the black dragon's aura. The space within thousands of miles around it was also frozen by an invisible force. At this critical moment, the black dragon used his ultimate skill without hesitation and coiled his body together. Black Tortoise Dragon Coil. This was the black tortoise's ultimate defensive skill that Ji Tianqing had taught him. The black dragon's 100-kilometer-long body coiled up, emitting a boundless black light that protected its head. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Bai Long, and the others immediately used their ultimate techniques to block the two palms. However, it was all in vain. Boom boom. Boom. Amidst a series of explosions, everyone's divine spells were all destroyed by the sky-splitting palm. The power of the two palm shadows did not diminish as they struck the black dragon. PFFF, the hundreds of kilometers of black light enveloping the black dragon was instantly shattered by the heaven-splitting palm. Its all-out defense couldn't even withstand a single blow. Immediately afterward, two heaven-splitting palm shadows struck it. Boom! With a muffled sound, the black dragon's body was shattered by the sky-splitting palm. It was broken into a dozen pieces and fell from the sky. The huge dragon head was also smashed into pieces by the giant palm. Dragon blood and brain matter splattered all over the sky. Not only was the dragon's body destroyed, but the dragon's soul was also shattered by the heaven-splitting palm. The black dragon didn't even have time to scream before it died. More than a dozen pieces of the dragon's body and the smashed dragon's head fell into the ruins below, mixed with dragon blood. The glazed fire dragon and the black dragon were killed one after another. Everyone's defense was useless. Even Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others took the opportunity to attack the Divine King's avatar. However, it was to no avail. The 10,000-kilometer-tall golden avatar didn't have any wounds or holes. The only change was that the light around his body dimmed even more, and his body became thinner. Everyone knew that the Divine King's avatar's power was weakening. However, they didn't dare to take the risk and couldn't continue fighting. They believed that before the Divine King's avatar's power dissipated, he could kill them all. Yun Yao immediately gave the order. Run! Where there's life, there's hope. The Divine King's avatar couldn't descend every day, and he wouldn't stay on planet Heaven forever. As long as they could escape today's calamity, they would have plenty of opportunities to deal with the Heaven Punishers in the future. Swoosh! Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others took Qian Yu and Lan Kun and ran away without hesitation. Everyone used their teleportation divine abilities and teleported 5 times in the blink of an eye, escaping 5,000 miles away. The Divine King's avatar chased after them at a moderate pace. He sneered disdainfully and said, "You still want to run away? Even Ji Tianqing couldn't escape from me. You're too naive." As he spoke, he crossed 10,000 miles in one step and stood in front of Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others. When everyone heard what he said, they were instantly worried and furious. Bastard! What did you do to Tianqing? Bastard! Where's Big Brother Tianqing? The Divine King's avatar looked down at everyone and sneered mockingly. Where else can he be? He's been waiting for you at the underworld. Since you love each other so much, I'll send you on your way. You'll have company on your way to the underworld. As he spoke, he used his ultimate divine ability again and attacked Qian Yu. Sky-shattering finger. The Divine King's avatar stretched out his right hand and pointed at Qian Yu with his index and middle fingers. Suddenly, a 1,000-mile-long golden finger descended from the sky and pierced toward Qian Yu. Heaven and earth within 10,000 miles froze. Qian Yu's divine soul was also suppressed and his aura was locked. There was nowhere for him to run. Yun Yao, Bai Long, Ji Wuhan, Ji Wushuang, and Lan Kun all used their ultimate techniques to block the sky-shattering finger descending from the sky. However, everyone's divine abilities and secret techniques were once again crushed by the sky-shattering finger. Bam! Following an earth-shattering explosion, Qian Yu's mountain-like body was also crushed by the sky-shattering finger. Thousands of pieces of ice-blue flesh and blood fell from the sky. With just one move, Qian Yu's physical body and divine soul collapsed at the same time. Not only that, Bai Long, Ji Wuhan, and Ji Wushuang were also sent flying by the violent shockwave. When everyone tried to block it, Ji Ku didn't do anything. She already knew the outcome. No one could block it and Qian Yu's body would also explode. Therefore, she could only suppress her endless grief and anger and secretly use the divine ability secret manual. Swish! Divine flames burst out of her body and she was as dazzling as the sun. Four different colored divine flames formed a projection of a divine pagoda that was thousands of feet tall and enveloped her body. At this moment, she was already connected to the Jiutian Tenju Tower a few 100 million miles away. She was equivalent to a portal. As long as everyone entered the tower, they would be able to return to the tower in the Five Elements world a few 100 million miles away. Quick! Let's go! Ji Ku stood in the sky and shouted with her immortal will, telling everyone to run away first. However, Yun Yao, Bai Long, Lan Kun and the two children were a few thousand miles away from her. Everyone came back to their senses and immediately teleported towards her. Unfortunately, the Divine King's avatar had been watching Ji Ku for a long time and saw something strange about her. You're just an ant. How can you do that? However, it's all in vain. The Divine King's avatar sneered in disdain and suddenly stretched out his arms as if he wanted to hug the sky. Apparently, he used that ultimate divine power again. Sky freezing, explode. Chapter 2751. It consumed too much divine power to use this divine power. The godly king's avatar's body became even dimmer and thinner. However, the power of this divine power was incomparably terrifying. A mysterious and vast divine power instantly enveloped a radius of tens of thousands of miles. This area was frozen by an invisible divine power. Not only did space freeze, but even the flow of time slowed down by 100 times. Yun Yao, Bai Long, and the others ran toward Ji Ku with all their might, but their speed was slowed down countless times. At the same time, under the precise control of the godly king's avatar, the space in this area exploded. Boom! Crack! An earth-shattering sound rang out. The world within a radius of tens of thousands of miles became fragmented, like a smashed mirror. Yun Shuiyan and Tian Shu, who were hiding tens of thousands of miles away, were fine. Lan Kun and Ji Wuhan, who were desperately teleporting, were also fine. But Ji Wushuang's body directly collapsed, turning into several hundred pieces of debris. Bai Long was also shattered into countless pieces of flesh and blood. Yun Yao's outcome was slightly better. Dense cracks appeared all over her body, but her divine body did not shatter. Dazzling rainbow divine light surged out of her body, protecting her body and divine soul. The one who suffered the most was, of course, Ji Ku. She was the target of the godly king's avatar. Not only did the source stone armor she wore crack, but her divine body also shattered into thousands of pieces. The divine pagoda formed by the four divine flames naturally dissipated. However, she was not dead yet. Her divine soul was still intact. She endured the pain of being cut into pieces and used her divine soul to control thousands of pieces of flesh and bones to gather together. However, the godly king's avatar did not give her a chance to recover her divine body. Boom! A mountain-sized golden fist descended from the sky and blasted Ji Ku into smithereens. Not only did thousands of pieces of flesh and blood dissipate, but even her divine soul was shattered. However, a strange scene occurred. The pieces of flesh and soul that were falling from the sky were actually ignited with dazzling golden divine flames. Nirvana divine flames. Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, the Nirvana divine flame burned everything and disappeared from the sky. In this way, only Yun Yao, Ji Wuhan, Lan Kuan, and the shattered white dragon remained in the sky. The white dragon was incomparably stubborn. Hundreds of pieces of flesh blossomed with white light and quickly gathered together in an attempt to restore its divine body. However, the God King's clone didn't give him the chance. Boom! A gigantic blood-red palm that blotted out the sky slammed down. Immediately, the heavens collapsed and the earth cracked. The sun and moon lost their light. White Dragon's divine soul shattered on the spot, and his physical body turned into fine powder that filled the sky, falling into the ruins. Thus, the White Dragon also died. The God King's clone's gaze landed on Yunyao. Seeing her body emitting a seven-colored brilliance, as if there was a special power protecting her, a hint of surprise flashed across his eyes. However, he didn't think too deeply about it. He waved his hand and grabbed at Ji Wuhan and Lan Kuan. Lan Kuan saw Bai Long being killed with his own eyes. He was filled with grief and indignation. His eyes turned red. Without waiting for the God King's clone's gigantic palm to grab him, he resolutely self-destructed. He was honest and straightforward by nature. After interacting with everyone for so many years, he had already planted a deep friendship. Now that the White Dragon was dead, and everyone was dead, he didn't want to live alone. Boom! A ball of dazzling blue light suddenly exploded high in the sky, like a huge mushroom cloud, rising into the sky. In that instant, the area within a radius of 50,000 miles became an icy blue world. The God King's clone also didn't expect that the seemingly honest Lan Kuan was actually so unyielding. He was the closest to Lan Kuan, so he bore the brunt of the most violent power. Boom! Under the icy blue shock wave, he was actually blasted hundreds of miles away, his body swaying. Although he wasn't injured, and he didn't look like he was in a sorry state. However, his figure became even fainter, close to being transparent. When the shock wave of Lan Kuan's self-destruction swept across a radius of 50,000 miles, there were other people who suffered as well. Ji Wuhan was already injured, and after being hit by the shock wave, he fainted on the spot, his body covered in cracks. Like broken porcelain, he would shatter at the slightest touch. Yin Yao's body was already covered in cracks. It was only because she was protected by the seven-colored divine light that she didn't collapse on the spot. After being swept by the shock wave, her body couldn't be maintained and immediately turned into thousands of pieces, scattering between heaven and earth. Even her divine soul was severely injured, and she fell into a coma. Yun Shuiyan, who was thousands of miles away, didn't have time to escape either. She was drowned by the shock wave of Lan Kuan's self-destruction. Boom! She was blasted away, tumbling and falling thousands of miles away. When she stopped in the sky, blood spurted out of her 7 orifices, and cracks appeared all over her body, turning into icy blue bloodlines. Her body was also about to collapse, and her strength was extremely weak. Even Tian Shu, who was protected in her arms, was severely injured in his coma. Tian Shu was originally a pile of meat paste, and now it was directly turned into a pile of meat paste, miserable to the extreme. His divine soul was also severely injured, and he fell into a deep hibernation. Only a weak trace of divine soul aura remained, proving that he was still alive. After a long time, when the overwhelming icy blue shock wave spread to 500,000 miles, it gradually dissipated. This area was completely destroyed into ruins, and chaos reigned. The extremely tragic battle of the gods had ended just like that. The Heaven Destroyer star was saved. Ji Tianqing and his companions had all died tragically. Only Ji Wuhan was still alive, but he had fallen into the hands of the God King's clone. The Divine King's clone stood in the primal chaos sky in a daze as he looked around. Other than him and the unconscious Ji Wuhan, there was no one else. He lowered his head to look at his almost transparent body and couldn't help but frown. Damn it! I only have 30% of my divine power left. He frowned and thought for a moment, then turned his head to look at Yun Shuiyan in the distance. Then, he carried the unconscious Ji Wuhan in his hand and flew toward Yun Shuiyan. Swoosh! After a few steps, the God King's clone landed in front of Yun Shuiyan and looked down at her indifferently. Even though the Heaven Destroyer race had won the final victory, Yun Shuiyan was not happy. She wasn't happy at all. Her injuries were too severe, so much so that they threatened her foundation of the divine path. She might not be able to break through to the God King realm in the future. Her most valued son, Tian Shu, was also in a state of uncertain survival. She was very anxious and sorrowful. Only when the God King's clone arrived did she see a life-saving straw. She hurriedly endured her injuries and knelt down. Greetings, Your Majesty. I beg Your Majesty to save my son. As she kowtowed, Yun Shuiyan begged with a heart full of grief. The God King's clone looked at her expressionlessly and said in a deep voice, Tian Shu is my last disciple, so I will naturally save him. Moreover, he is already injured to such an extent that it is unsuitable for him to remain in the mortal realm. However, I will be taking him back to the God realm, which is an act of defiance against the will of the heavens. You will have to pay the price. Yun Shuiyan ignored the last sentence. When she heard that Tian Shu could still be saved and would be brought back to the God realm by the God King's clone, she revealed a relieved expression and hurriedly kowtowed in thanks. Yun Shuiyan will never forget Your Majesty's grace of rebirth. The God King's clone shook his head expressionlessly. There's no need to never forget. You just need to make a contribution. Chapter 2752. Ah! Yun Shuiyan was stunned. She subconsciously raised her head and looked at the godly king's clone in confusion. Your Majesty, how can I contribute? At this moment, many thoughts flashed through her mind. Could it be that Your Majesty wants me? No. No matter how beautiful I am, I'm covered in blood, and I'm severely injured. Furthermore, His Majesty is not a vulgar person. Most importantly, this is only his clone, not his true body. The godly king's clone saw her constantly changing expression and guessed that she was imagining things. However, he did not expose her. Instead, he pointed to the sky. I forcefully opened the passage between the two worlds and have been suppressed by the heavenly Tao. My strength has weakened. Now that the passage is healing, I need your help if my clone wants to bring them back. You should know the divine realm's blood-burning technique, right? Upon hearing this, Yun Shuiyan roughly understood what he meant. Her expression changed. Her eyes flashed with indignation, but she could not show it. She could only lower her head. She fell silent. She was struggling and hesitating. The godly king's clone did not say anything else. He waved his hand and shot out a golden light. He collected Dubhe, who had been reduced to meat paste, and held it in his right hand. Follow me. Then, he brought Yun Shuiyan away from planet Heaven Trader and into the void. About 15 minutes later, the two flew into the void and stood tens of thousands of miles below the passage between the two worlds. It had been 12 hours since the passage had appeared. The passage that was tens of thousands of miles long had shrunk by more than half. It was only 1,500 miles long. Furthermore, the golden divine light and lightning in the passage had dimmed significantly. In 6 hours at most, the passage between the two worlds would heal. It would be repaired by the heavenly Tao. Yun Shuiyan immediately understood. Even the most powerful godly king could only interfere with the heavenly Tao's power. They could not truly contend against it. Just as she was in a daze, the godly king's clone spoke. "What are you waiting for?" His voice was cold and emotionless. Yun Shuiyan's body stiffened. She hesitated for a moment before making up her mind. She looked up and asked, "Your Majesty, I was once a divine lord of the upper realm. In this life, I mastered the coiling dragon 4 seas and have a chance of breaking through to the godly king realm. In comparison, my talent and future are much brighter than Dubhe's. I hope that your Majesty the divine king will understand. I am willing to serve you like a dog or horse. Even if I am a slave or a maid, I am willing to do so." Clearly, Yun Shuiyan did not wish to die. She had died a horrible death in her previous life. In this life, she was full of ambition. Not only did she want to return to the God realm for revenge, she also wanted to break through to the God King realm. In order to survive, in order to step onto the peak of the divine path, she would rather sacrifice her son, Tian Shu. This was the ultimate egoist. The God King's clone naturally understood her intentions. In fact, even before she spoke and hesitated, the God King's avatar had already guessed what she was thinking. However, the God King's clone expressionlessly shook his head and refused. "I can understand your feelings, but unfortunately, I can only return smoothly if you ignite your blood and transform into a deity. Furthermore, Dubhe is your son. He has inherited all of your talents and your coiling dragon 4 seas. Under this emperor's nurturing, his future achievements are limitless. Most importantly, he is not wise enough, which is why he is absolutely loyal to me. As for a beautiful, scheming, and ambitious woman like you, I don't like that at all." This was the longest sentence the God King's clone had spoken since he had descended into the mortal realm. There was no other way. He only had 30% of his divine power left. If he were at his peak, he would not have wasted his breath on Yun Shuiyan. Yun Shuiyan fell silent. Her blood-stained face revealed a bitter cold smile. "So, in the end, birth is still the most important thing? For a lowly person like me, no matter how much effort I put in, I will still end up paving the way for someone else, right?" Yun Shuiyan's voice was filled with tears of blood. Her eyes were lifeless, filled with despair and indignation. The God King's clone was expressionless as he said indifferently, "Wrong. The most important thing is luck, it is fate." He. Yun Shuiyan laughed like a madwoman. Tears of blood flowed from her eyes as she looked up into the sky and roared, "F***ck your fate. I refuse to accept this." As she roared, she looked like she had gone mad. However, she had no other choice. She could only use the burning blood divine transformation technique. Her entire body ignited with bloody flames that soared into the sky. This divine ability was very common in the God realm, but it was also a forbidden divine ability. This was because its nature was very similar to self-destruction. Sacrificing everything one had, including one's life, soul, and everything one had learned in one's life, transformed into the most powerful force. Only those who were destined to die would use this divine ability to fulfill their wishes or goals. Whoosh! The bloody flames that surged into the sky burned more and more fiercely. In just a few short breaths, Yun Shuiyan's flesh and soul disappeared. She turned into a bloody flame that soared into the sky and flew through the void towards the passage between the two worlds. When the bloody flames rushed into the passage, a loud, dull sound immediately rang out from within. Rumble. As the rumbling of thunder rang out, golden divine light and lightning shone brightly, bursting forth with even more power. Immediately, the passage between the two worlds stopped shrinking and gradually expanded outwards. When the passage expanded to 5,000 miles, it gradually stabilized. The God King clone looked up and muttered to himself, although this power is very weak, it's enough. Then, he carried the unconscious Ji Wuhan in his left hand and the sky pivot wrapped in golden light in his right hand as he flew towards the passage between the two worlds. As he flew through the void, his body shrank as well. The God King clone was about to return to the God realm. However, when he was still 15,000 miles away from the passage between the two worlds, a change occurred in the void behind him. Kaboom! An earth-shaking sound that sounded like a thunderclap from the 9 heavens suddenly exploded in the void. Following the loud sound, a 4,000-mile-long and 4,000-mile-wide gap actually collapsed in the cold, pitch-black void. Resplendent golden light, white light, purple lightning, scarlet flames, and icy blue divine light lit up in the huge gap. 5-colored divine light and lightning bolts firmly supported the gap. Another passage between the two worlds appeared. When the God King clone heard the loud sound, his expression immediately changed, and he subconsciously looked back. He saw 2 sky-blotting dark golden dragon claws extend from the passage between the two worlds and strike the God King clone with supreme divine might. That's right. The God King clone didn't appear in the newly appeared passage between the two worlds, only the sky-blotting dark golden dragon claws. The God King clone's expression changed drastically at the sight of this. His eyes revealed unparalleled fury and shock. "It's you!" The God King clone roared in fury, shaking the void for tens of thousands of miles. However, no one answered from the passage between the two worlds, nor did any god appear. Only the 2 dark golden dragon claws slammed into the God King's avatar with the fastest speed and the most violent power. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.